Hello everyone, welcome back. In this video, we're going to be recreating an awards level website. So let me just refresh the page and show you what we will be making today. And there's a cute little intro here. And we have a video playing of KDA pop stars from League of Legends. And we have a small cute little fish animation there. And we can go from day to night mode. And then when we scroll down, we have some slight animations, some currently just some dummy text there. And then we zoom in to focus on the work. So you can put your work here instead. And then you scroll down and then you get a mini platform animation like here. Very, very cute. And yeah, and you can go into light and dark mode whenever you want. So the site that we're recreating is from BoCoCo33, and his website won honorable mention. And it also has an insanely high user average score of 8.32, which is usually higher than many site of the days. So this is one of the best. And the reason I chose this is because it's very unique. It also got praises from Bruno Simon himself. So these are all the technologies we will be using. Everything in this orange, reddish, brownish color, I expect you to at least know the basics of. And everything in black, I will explain it as if you've never used these before. So if you want to catch up to speed because you don't know some of this stuff, here are some great GSAP resources. Of course, the documentation is also good as well, but you can also watch these YouTube videos. Here's one for a free 3GS tutorial. It's only 15 minutes long. And here is a good one for Blender. Now, if you can already make a house like this without any help, then you don't need to watch any more tutorials. You can follow along pretty easily. If you want the best of both worlds, definitely purchase this course called 3GS Journey. I'll talk about a little bit more about this at the end of the video, but I am not sponsored by him to say this. It really is just the best course on planet Earth. Now, I also wanted to say this is my first full course, so definitely leave some feedback in the comments below, like what did I do poorly, what did I do well, and what should I change, for next time? Like, should I leave and show my errors, or should I just edit it out? So definitely let me know in the comments below, and I hope you enjoy this course and learn a lot of new things. If you know how to model something like this in Blender and you understand assigning materials and modifiers, you probably don't need to watch anything that I cover in my Blender modeling section. Just make sure you come back when we prepare export to 3JS. But there are two things you should know before you start modeling as well. And the first one is if you're using baked textures, we're not going to cover this in this course, but if you want to, just make sure your meshes aren't inside of each other. So like this, right now the cube is inside of this house thing, and you don't want this because you'll get black outlines here. So here's an example of just what I mean. So all these wood planks, they're like inside of this house model, and you can see the result. You get this black outline here. So this doesn't matter for what we're doing in this course, but if you want to use baked textures, it definitely matters. But you'll see me move them out. So for example, let's go to wireframe here. So you need to find a workaround basically, and put it really close to the mesh, but not inside the mesh. And you can see the result is pretty much the same, but you have to do some extra work just to make sure it's not inside. And you can see from the camera angle, it's the same result as if the cube was actually inside. The other thing you want to do is delete faces that will never be seen, or edges and vertices as well. So if my camera is only moving like this in my scene, then I know I'll never see these back faces, so I can select this and just delete this face, and I'll go here and delete these faces as well. And you notice I'll never see those as well. So yeah, just keep those two things in mind. Okay, so I just added a reference image, and let's start on the desk here. So I'm going to Shift A MC for a cube. And then I'll just scale it on the y-axis, and then on the z-axis. Actually, let me turn on my screencast keys so you can see what I'm pressing. Not all the keys show. For example, when I hit S and then X to lock it on the x-axis, it's not showing. But That's fine. So I'm just gonna scale it up. And we can always change the dimensions later, so it's um, you don't have to spend too much time on this. Once you know the fundamentals, you can just do anything. And then I'm just gonna bring it up, and I'll come here and add a bevel modifier. Let's turn up the segments to like 4, and the amount to like 0.04. That's maybe a little too much, so 0.02. Is this curved? Yeah, it doesn't really look curved. I don't want to waste your time too much playing around with this bevel, but you can just play around with it and kind of adjust it. Then I'm going to shade smooth so we don't get those kind of choppy things, so shade smooth. And then we have to change on harden normals and then auto smooth here. And now you can see there's no more of those lines there. Okay, so let's start on this table leg here. I want to keep the same bevel modifier, so I can just Shift D and duplicate this, and then I'll just scale it down to get to a size that's similar to this relative to the table, and scale it down, and then just bring it down. Now it doesn't have to be too precise because we can always change all of this stuff later, and most of the time you're never going to get it on your first time. Okay, then I'm going to enter edit mode and wireframe vertice. Select these, enter side, and then I'm going to extrude out a little bit just to get this thing here. And then I'm going to move it down with GZ, and then move this out here. And then I can highlight these and Z, and then 0. And what it'll do, it'll line it out on each other. So you can see before, if I undo it, it's kind of tilted. And if you're like up here, it will be even more tilted. But S, Z, and then 0. And now you can see they're kind of even. But you can see it kind of thins out here. So you can just grab a vertice, well, both of the vertices, and then GX to kind of move it out. Or if you want this one, you can do GX and then I'll just add a mirror modifier so we don't have to do double the work. So I add a loop cut there, and then select these and delete these vertices. And yeah, okay, so now we can add a mirror modifier to this. Come here, mirror modifier, and turn on clipping so they don't go through each other. And there is our desk there. Okay, now let's start making this leg here. So I'm just gonna shift right click. Actually, I'll do select this, Shift S, and cursor to selection. And that'll put our cursor on the origin point, and I think that's in the center. And then I'm gonna Shift D this one, and then Shift S and selection to cursor. And then I'll just scale it to the however that looks. I don't think it's a complete cube, but something similar. So yeah, that looks okay. Now remember, we don't want it inside, so I don't know, I'm just really picky. Okay, that's fine. Then let's just move this up and then inset it. That looks a little too big. So I'm gonna scale it back up a little bit. And then I'll go one more. Okay. And I'm gonna enter local view so I can just see this a little bit better. Okay, so let's just make sure, yeah, this is inside. We can always just go back and adjust it later. And I also want to delete the bottom face because I know we'll for sure never see this ever. So yeah, depending on the angle, we might never even see these back faces either, but we can always change that later. Now I'm gonna add a mirror modifier here, and I'm gonna flip it on the y-axis and then select my mirror object as this table here. So it's flipping over there. And then I'm gonna do the same thing for this one. So I'm gonna add a mirror modifier to this one. And then I'll select my object, this table, flip it on the y-axis, and there we have our table. This next part is a personal preference of mine, but I like putting in materials as I go, just kind of see how my progress is going. But we will go over all the materials later. But I'm just going to add dummy materials. So I'm going to select this, come down to Material tab, and give it a one called Tabletop. Now it's my second time recording this, which is why you see 0.002 there. So I'm just going to select reference for my color image. So if you want to copy that, here's the hex, and here's that. But we'll fix it up later. And for stylized scenes, what you want is to turn down specular and turn up the roughness. So that should be good. And then I'm going to hold Z on my keyboard to go to material preview so I can take a look at how it's looking. This one, I'm going to add a new one. I'm going to call it table leg. And I'm going to select this one, and we want to make this one the active object. So hold shift and select this one, and now you can see it's in the orange. Then we can do Control L and link materials. So now this one also has the same material as this one. But this one has an additional material you can see right here. So we can add a new one, and I'm going to call it table leg black. And for stylized scenes, you don't want it to be completely black, but something close to black, and I think that's pretty good. And then we can adjust this as well. Okay, and then in edit mode, enter face select, and then hold shift alt on the edge to select these and keep them selected. And then we can select this material, hit assign, and now these faces will have that material. And then we can edit, enter back, and let's exit local view to get back to the screen. Then let's add, let's go to our render settings. Yeah, Eevee is fine, and just add a basic light, basic sunlight. Now we can always deal with this. We will cover this later, but this is just a personal preference. And then I'm gonna go to rendered, and I'm just gonna mess with the light settings, just to kind of get a feel of how it's gonna look when we put it on the web, and which direction I kind of want it to go. Yeah, okay. Okay, so let's continue out modeling the desk. Okay, so now let's add this little box cupboard thingy here. So I'm gonna go back to solid, and then tab on this one, and then shift D on this face, and then with it still selected, separate by selection. And then I'll select it and just scale it down, SY, SX, and kind of just reposition it to the front of my table to a reasonable size, SX. Yeah, we kind of just have to eyeball it. And now that I think about it, it kind of looks, this table kind of looks too small in the Y width. So I'm just gonna move these out a little more to give it some room. And then I'm gonna GZ and move it down a little bit. Actually, I want to move it quite a bit because it looks like this comes outside. Yeah, that's fine. And I'm going to enter edit mode, E to extrude this down, like follows. And we can just guess the size, like so. I'm going to enter local view, and I'm going to inset this one, and click to confirm, and then SX to scale it and make the sides a little thinner. Hit E to extrude and bring it down. So we have a little nice cupboard there. And it looks like this is kind of bigger. Now we could just extrude here and then make the sides bigger. So I think that's what I'm going to do. So I'm just going to extrude here and then select this with Shift Alt, get this loop here, Alt E to extrude along the normals and just kind of bring it up there. And yeah, and then SZ to bring it up. Okay, let's enter exit view and see what it looks like. SY, GC. Okay, so let's start actually getting organized. I'm gonna click on these and start renaming them. So tabletop, table leg, table leg holder, and then table drawer. I actually don't know what that's called. And then I'm gonna select all of them, and then M and new collection, and I'll call it table. And I actually want to create one more new collection, so I'm gonna right click and I'll call this table all. And this is pretty much all the assets that are gonna be for or near the table, so like this drawer here. And then I'm gonna move the table into that table. And then we can add another collection here for this one, maybe for the plant too. And yeah, so it'll be all in table. And then we can just quickly do stuff like this or select objects, you know, so on and so forth. Okay, so let's start on this trash can. I'm going to shift right click M and add a cube, bring that up, and let's add a subdivision surface modifier. So let's crank that up to 2. Right click, shade smooth, enter edit mode. It's kind of thicker on the bottom, so I'm going to give it a loop cut and bring it down here. Then I'll select all ASZ to bring it up a little bit. And it looks like it's scaled on the X a lot smaller, so I'm going to scale on the X like so. And maybe a little on the Y as well, just a little bit. Then I can inset the face with I. And I think that's fine. And then I'm going to hit E to extrude down and Z. And that's a little too thin, so I'm going to S and just Shift Z to make it a little less, make it a little thicker on the edges. So let's go, yeah, that's fine. Then with this face still selected, I'm going to Shift D to duplicate it, and then right click to cancel, and then P and separate by selection, so now it's its own mesh. Then I'll go into edit mode, select that, bring it up, and this will be our lid. So let's give it a solidify modifier. Let's increase its thickness a little bit. And you can see the shading is a little off, so we can come here and enable auto smooth. And now it's kind of looking like a cap. And then we can just scale it up to cover our trash can. Like follows. And maybe I should have added some loop cuts because it's not really referencing the image. So if I add one here and one here, it's kind of looking more like the trash can. So let me add a loop cut here as well. And yeah, so it's kind of looking a little more similar. For this little step thing, I think what I'm going to do is shift right click somewhere near the center of my mesh. And then I'm going to click this and just duplicate it. And then I'll do Shift S and selection to cursor. But the mesh's origin point isn't in the center, so it's kind of offset here. We could just do GZ, but I want to fix it. So object set origin to geometry, and now you can see the origin point is in the center. And then Shift S, selection to cursor. Then I want to add a loop cut, and I just want to make it a little flatter on this end, like so. And then I'm going to GX and just move it out so I can see what I'm doing. Very nice. And then SX, and then of course SY, and then S Shift Z to make it smaller, and then maybe make it GY again, GX. And of course we don't want it inside, so just make it really close, but not inside. And no one can tell from from the camera angle if it's inside or not. So that's fine. Yeah, so there's our trash can. Okay, so I'm gonna hit A to select everything and kind of move it off the ground here. And then I'm gonna do Shift A S and selection cursor to world origin and just add a dummy floor. We can always change this later, but I just want like something there. And I'm gonna select these objects, Shift right click, and then selection to cursor. And whoops, I need to do keep offset. Otherwise, all the origin points will go to that area. And I'm gonna scale it down and bring it up and just kind of place my trash can where it's supposed to be. And the more I look at it, I feel like these are too thick, so I'm gonna do SY and just scale them down on the y-axis a little bit. Okay, so let's make this little desk thingy here. I'm going to shift duplicate this one, GZ to move it up, SY, SZ, just kind of make it into the shape that it's supposed to look like, and SY, SX. Maybe actually I should have left it like that. Then I'll add a loop cut here. Actually, it's kind of thin. And I'm gonna extrude that face out just a little bit. GX. Yeah, that looks nice. And I'm gonna delete this face here. And I think I can just duplicate my cupboard. This might be a little dangerous, but let's just see if it works out. GX. And then I think there are 3 levels here, so let's go add an array modifier, and instead of the x-axis, we want to do the negative z-axis, and let's just type 1.05. Oops, negative 1.05. That's a little too much. And then let's add one more. And now SZ just to scale it down until it hits the size. Yeah, and there we have our desk. So I'm gonna move it to a new collection and call it bars. Shift S, GZ, scale it down, GZ. Okay, and for this small little handle here, let's select this, enter edit mode, select this face, Shift D to duplicate this, GZ, Z, and just scale it up to make it the same size. Then I'm gonna hit E to extrude it a little bit, like so. I'm gonna hit Control L, and this will select the linked faces for us. And let's just get in there and delete this face, because I know we'll never see that. And oops, select this, Control L, and then GX, and just kind of move it in there. And make it a little thinner. And yeah, so there we have our desk. I mean, our drawers. So let's make this mini table here. I'm gonna Shift D, duplicate that, S to scale it down, SY to put it about 70% of the table. And I think that looks good. So let's add some loop cuts. I'm gonna add one and put it near the edge, and then add another one on this side and just bring it to the leg size. Okay, and then let's just extrude this down a little bit. So easy. And yeah, it looks good. And then let's just add a mirror modifier so we don't have to deal with everything else on the left here. So wireframe, vertices select, delete these vertices. And then let's add a mirror modifier here. and y-axis, and then turn on clipping, and then GZ, and just move it on the table. And it actually looks like it's slanted here, so we can fix that with tab, select edge, and then just GY and move this in. And there we have our table. So yeah. It also looks like there's actually an inside area too. So we can actually make that. So let's just do that. I'm actually gonna bring this down then. I wasn't really thinking. So GZ. That might be a little too tall, but I think that's fine. Then I'm gonna add 2 loop cuts here. So yeah, and then SZ to make it really thin. GZ, it's pretty thin. And then I'm gonna select this and just extrude it out like that. Okay, so that kind of looks like our table. Let's add a room. So I'm gonna delete this plane with X and delete, and then cursor to world origin, Shift A, and add a cube and just scale it up. And then I'll enter edit mode, select these faces, delete them, and then select these faces, and then Alt E extrude along normals. And then it's kind of glitching out here, so we can do S and then it'll scale evenly. I'll hold shift to make it a little more accurate, and then just kind of guess the thickness that I want for the room. And that looks fine. So let's go to the side view. Whoops. Wireframe. Just bring it up. And I want to see how it looks in orthographic. So let's use Control Alt 0 on the numpad to snap my camera to a view position. And then with the camera selected, I'll just use G to move it around. And GZZ to move it like this. And let's go to orthographic. And wow, that's kind of glitched. So I'm just gonna turn up the scale a little bit and hit 0 on your numpad to view the camera. And yeah, we can start adjusting the proportions so it matches a little bit better. Actually, I think the camera angle is like kind of too much to the side, so I'm gonna hit RXX to rotate on the local x-axis, and then GZ to move up my camera. And I might have made that a little too much, so maybe RXX. But we can always change this later just to see what camera angle works best. Okay, let's start on this thing right here. So I'm going to Shift A, add a cylinder, and make sure that's at 16 vertices. Okay, yeah, we don't want too much geometry. And I'm just going to bring that up, go into edit mode, wireframe, select the vertices, and let's add a loop cut here first, and then scale these down. And I think this might be too close to the bottom. We can just move it up like so. And this looks a little too tall relative. And I think that's good for the basic shape. Of course, we can always just play around with it. Shade smooth, and then we need to turn on this auto smooth thing here. And that already looks pretty good. Let's inset this face and just bring it down. And it kind of looks jaggedy on these edges, but from far away, no one can. I don't think anyone's actually going to be looking. I don't think. But if let's just fix it, and we can always get rid of it later. So maybe a bevel, and let's change it to like 0.5 and 4 segments. Yeah, it's still glitchy, so maybe we need subdivision surface. Yeah, but this adds a lot of geometry, so maybe it's not ideal, but I think it's fine. We can always just remove that stuff later. Okay, so let's start modeling this plant. So I'm gonna Shift A and add a circle, 16 vertices. Yeah, that's fine. Let's enter local view, go into 7 with numpad, and let's go into edit mode, vertices, and turn on proportional editing, which you can hit here, or you can hit O on your keyboard. And then let's just select this and move it out. You can use your mouse wheel to change the sphere of influence until you maybe find something that can make it look nice. And I'm gonna lock it on the x-axis. And then I'll do it for this side as well until I get a leaf shape that I like. Then let's hit Control F and do a grid fill. And we want a line down here and just some better topology. So let's do 6 and maybe put an offset of 1. And yeah, this is much better topology because we get the quads here. Now you could manually do it. Some people manually do it depending on the shape of the leaf they need, but this is good enough for us. So I'm gonna add a loop cut here and a loop cut here. And then I'm just gonna highlight these vertices and extrude them out. Let's just extrude it out at X. And let's just pick these center ones and then GZ and then increase your sphere of influence to make it kind of curvy. And maybe because I need some more geometry here, so let's do that again. And we can do the same for this leaf here. Maybe select all of them. Yeah, and then let's do shade smooth, and then subdivision surface, as well as a solidify modifier and turn up the thickness a little bit. And this looks kind of too big, so we can just add another loop cut here, and it will give us some nicer geometry. And that's pretty much off the leaf. So, you know, if you want to make it go down, you can just move these vertices. Well, we can turn off proportional editing and just move it down and just adjust these. And if you need more geometry, you can add a loop cut, or you can just extrude. And yeah, just that's pretty much it for the leaf. And to make life easier, what we can do is go into edit mode, select these, Shift S, cursor to selected, and then we can go into object and set origin and origin to 3D cursor. And now the origin point of this leaf is here, so later if we want to scale it or something, that's fine here. And you can give variety to your leaf, so let's select these, and then if you want to do SX or something, and then proportional editing, you know, you can make it you can make it how you want it. So just play around with the leaf, and when you're done, you can do Shift S and selection to cursor and just scale it down. And of course, you want to look at your camera view just to make sure it's all looking good as well. And yeah, just play around with that. One more thing I want to do is prevent the selection of the camera and the light. So I can come up here and click this, and then I can uncheck it here as well as the light. So now when I press A, it doesn't select these because I was pressing A a lot and it kept selecting these, but I never wanted to select these. And if you want to select them again, you can just turn them on. So now you can see when I hit A to select everything, it selects that. But I don't want that, so let's just do that. So here you can see I was playing with this computer holder, but it kind of feels off in a low poly scene. So I'm not going to be making this table holder. I'm going to shift right click and add a cube, and then SX, SY, SX, SZ, and then bring it up and just scale arbitrarily to a size that I want. And then we can inset. So I'm going to select this face, inset it, and that looks, hers is actually really thin. I need to turn off proportional editing and then turn it in, so it's kind of really thin on the edges and it doesn't go that far back. But we wanted it to be noticeable when we actually scroll through, so yeah, that's definitely noticeable. And yeah, for the computer holder, let's just select this face down here, inset the face, and just bring it down, and then SX to scale it up a little bit, and just E to extrude it down. Let's enter exit so we can take a look. Maybe let's move all of it up so we can see it a little bit better. Make it a little bit larger. Let's just bring it down. And yeah, let's add a loop cut here. Go into face select, select all of these, and whoops, let me turn back on my screencast keys. Alt E, extrude along the normals, and then SX to scale that up. Then maybe SZ to make it a little thinner. Okay, so let's start on this keyboard here. I'm just going to duplicate the table and then scale it down. Enter edit mode and local view and bring it up to the origin point of here. And then I'll exit local view and then I'll just shift right click somewhere on the desk and selection to cursor. So now it's on top, and then I'll just rescale it down to like a keyboard shape or something. And it looks like hers is slanted, so we can just enter edit mode, grab a thing and bring it down with Z, and incline in the center so we can add a loop cut as well, and GZ, and then face select and try and get this loop with Alt, and let's just scale it in, I guess. So maybe let's crank this up to like 0.2 or something. Hard normals, auto smooth, yeah, okay. Let's go to render just to see how it looks. And of course we'll never need the bottom stuff side on this keyboard, so I'm just going to delete that face right now. And let's give this a different material, just so I can see it better. I'll call it keyboard. Keyboard. Down roughness, up the roughness. Base color, something slighter darker. Okay, so let's start on the keys. I'm gonna Shift A MC to add a cube, and then local view real quick. And let's go and put the origin point to the bottom of this. So whoops, I need to be in edit mode, and this will help us later when we want to scale on the z-axis. And let's also delete this bottom face because I know we will never see it. Then let's scale this down, this top face down. Then yeah, let's just scale it down, SC, and I accidentally scaled in edit mode, so it's changing the origin point. So make sure you're back in object mode and scale it in object mode instead. Then let's add a bevel modifier. Let's crank this segment up to 4. That looks fine. And you can manually rotate this to like RX, for example, RY to match the rotation of this slanted keyboard. But what else you can do is turn on snapping. So snapping and then face, and closest is fine, and align rotation to target. So let's just scale this down. Now when I press G to move, notice that it's snapping to the face of the keyboard. And when I click to confirm, notice it's perfectly aligned with the keyboard. And remember, if you move it, you know, you can see it snapping to the other things as well. Okay, so let's add an array modifier, and it looks like that's backwards. So let's just crank it that way instead. And let's add 4. Or maybe we can make it smaller and add a 5th one and a 6th one. Then let's add one more array modifier. And instead of x, we'll do on y. Okay, so it's going to be negative y. And we can just increase that. So get as many keys as you want. Whoops. gy. Oh, and I should turn off snapping. gy. sy maybe. s shift z. Yeah, it's pretty good. So now let's go into edit mode. So now let's apply the modifiers. And now you can see there's all these keys that we can select. And you can click on one and hit Control L to select the linked phase, the linked objects, and delete them. So here I'll want a shift key, so I'll delete this. So delete phases. What else I want to do actually is separate them by selection, by loose parts. So I'll do P and then select loose parts. And notice all of these are now their individual key. So you can just hit them like any other mesh and delete them. And I want a spacebar here and delete them. Now, when you're rearranging keys, you can turn on snapping again. So when you move, it doesn't start going inside. Or alternatively, you can lock it on the local axes. So GX, you can see this is the global, but if you hit X again, it goes local and it'll slide along its local axes. So when you move it around, you can come up here and just change it to local, and then G, so select the key G, and then Shift Z, and it'll only move here, and you'll notice that it'll never clip inside the keyboard. So that's what I'm gonna do. I'm just gonna rearrange delete keys with local and G and Shift Z, so it goes like this, and yeah. Okay, let's start giving these materials. I'm gonna select the first one so I can find where it starts, and then I'll just scroll down until the last cube. And I'll hold shift to select the bottom and select all the stuff in between. Let's add a material key. Let's make it a little pink, I guess. Let's just see. And specular roughness. And then with the active object on the one with the material, control and link materials. And let's just find something nice. And if you want to add these separate colors for these individual ones, I guess you can go for it. But I'm just going to leave it as is. Okay, let's start on this trackpad thing. So I'm going to Shift D and duplicate the keyboard and then just scale it down. And yeah, I'm going to hit Alt to select the loop here. And hit X and dissolve the edges because we don't need that anymore. And let's just move it GY, and that's kind of cool. And then I'm going to select this edge and just move it down a little bit. Then let's just give it a new material, and I'll just call it trackpad. And let's just give it that wood color. And it's got white in the center, so let's select the face was 3, inset, and GX to move it up. And add another material, assign that material, and call it, yeah. Oh, I forgot to put up the roughness for the other one as well. Yeah, I mean, that's fine. Let's see. Let's make this pencil holder thing. I'm gonna shift right click somewhere, Shift A, add a cube, local view, and let's go to solid and just select these edges. and Control B to bevel them, and then scroll up on the mouse wheel to get like a nice bevel. And then shade smooth, let's turn on auto smooth. Then let's just select this top face, inset, and bring it down with extrude and Z. Let's get out and then scale it down. Let's just take a look at how it looks. Actually, let's turn on snapping, and then let's just G. Yeah, that's good. Oh, I should also change this back to global. And let's scale it down a little more. And yeah, that's why we should make the origin point at the bottom. So when we scale it in object, it goes from there. And let's turn on snapping again. And yeah, let's turn it off and then let's scale it. Whoops, I guess the origin point wasn't completely at the bottom. And yeah, we'll never see this bottom face, so let's delete it. Delete faces. Now let's add a pencil. So I'm just going to Shift A and add another cube in there. Let's just SZ it up, GZ. And let's just extrude this and scale it down to like a pencil or something. Whoops, whoa. S, Shift Z, SZ, GZ. And let's just move it around in there. Well, I made the lamp, but it kind of looks out of place, so I'm just going to delete that. But it's just one half a sphere and another sphere if you wanted to make that. And let's make a more cliche sort of a lamp. So 16 vertices is fine, and let's just scale it down and scale it like so. And let's enter local view and just delete this face. Then bring it up off the ground. And what we can do now is inset and then extrude up. Maybe make it a little bit bigger. And yeah, if you want to add more geometry, you can. And you know, just play around with it, add bevel modifiers and stuff. But I'm just going to keep it pretty simple. And then we can shift right click here and just add a cylinder and scale it down, scale this down, and just delete the face here and as well as here. And then we can select the loop and Alt-E along normals and just drag it in like so. And because no one will ever see inside, we don't have to deal with that. And shade smooth, turn on auto smooth, and shade smooth, and also turn on auto smooth here. Next, let's just add a random box. So Shift A, M. Actually, so let's just make a box now, and I'm just going to duplicate this SY and GY, and then move it up, and then enter edit mode and just bring this one up. And then add a loop cut. Well, actually, let's just extrude from the top. Select these faces with Alt and try and get this loop. And extrude along normals. And SY to make it kind of even on the sides. Okay, let's model book. So I'm just going to Shift A MC to add a cube. Scale it down and scale it to the Y, scale it to the X, scale it down, and try and get a book shape. And when that's good, I'm just going to select 3 of the faces. So let's enter local view and delete these, inset them with I. And then Alt-E extrude along normals and hold Shift to be more precise and just bring it in. And you can add bevel here if you want it to not too square with Control B on the edges, but I think that's fine. So let's start adding a window. I'm going to Shift right click where I want a window and add a cube. And I'll use this cube to cut out my window from the mesh. So just scale it up and find a window size that you like and make sure it goes through here. And with this selected, you can add a Boolean modifier go to difference, and then with the eyedropper for the object, select this object. And now when I click on this object and hide it, you can see it cut through the mesh. I'm gonna undo that and show you a much quicker way to do that. Whoops, let me leave that cube there. If you go to edit, preferences, and search in bool, you can activate this. And now you can select your cube and then the active object you want to cut out of, and then hit Control minus on your numpad. And I guess if you're on Mac, it's probably going to be Command minus on your numpad instead. And you get the same thing. You can see when I move it. Yeah. So when you're ready, you can apply it. But before I apply it, I'm just going to Shift D and duplicate this and then hide it just to make sure later in case I want to change it if I ever mess up. And I don't want to select that and disable it in renders. And I'll call this backup. Okay, so I'm gonna select here and hit Control A to apply it. Okay, so let's start on our window. I'm just gonna shift right click somewhere here, Shift A and add a plane, and then RY90 to rotate on the Y axis. And then just kind of scale it up over my window. Now, of course, if you're using baked textures, remember you probably want some workaround to this, like expanding this slightly to match the window and being more precise, but for us it doesn't matter. And then I'll add a loop cut, so let's go into edit mode and scroll up for 2 loop cuts, and whoops, click to confirm, SZ to scale it down to a thinness that you like, and let's do another one for the vertical, and then whoops, SY, and scale that down as well. Then we can enter face select and select the faces, the 4 faces. Whoops, going too fast here. And then hit I to inset them, and then just E to extrude them out. And then at the end, just delete them. And yeah, so now GX to move it out. Let's go back to solid so I can see it better. GX, and maybe just scale it down so we don't see the edges. And this feels kind of thick, so what we can do is do let's go into face select and Shift Alt to select the entire loop. Well, it's just Alt, but I want to hold Shift to select another loop as well. So, and then we can just scale it SZ when we select it and get to a thinness that we like. Same here as well, Shift Alt, and with Shift we can do that, and then SY, and then scale that down as well to get a desired that we want. If we want to like add an additional frame, we could just extrude these faces right now. But if we want like an inner frame, what we can do is hit Alt and select this edge loop here, hit E to extrude, and just right click to cancel, and then scale it up with S. And of course, if you want to make it even, you can lock it on an axis as well. So I'm going to do SD just to make it a little more even. Then we can enter face select, select this loop, and just E to extrude it out. So now we get the outer frame as well as the inner frame. And we can just move this in just a little bit. Just kind of adjust it to how we want it to look in our screen. So let's start modeling a chair. We're not going to be doing this chair. It's too complicated for a low poly scene. And don't worry, in future videos, we're going to cover these more complicated meshes like a figurine and these other ones. But in this tutorial, I just want to keep it really simple. So let's just make a basic chair. I'm going to Shift A and add a cube and bring it up and bring this down with SZ, and then just scale it up to an arbitrary size. And you don't really have to be too precise. Then I'll add 2 loop cuts for my armrests, and then hit SX to move them to the side. Now, depending on your axis, you might do SY instead, of course. And then we need one more, and this will be for the back. Then we can just select these faces and E to extrude them. And then we can take the back ones only and then extrude those. And now we have our basic chair shape, and what we can do now is add a subdivision surface and crank that up to 2, and then right click shade smooth. And if you already like what you see, you can just use that, or you can just start editing it. So for example, let's move this in a little bit, maybe SX, and let's just just play around with it. Now, I'm not doing anything in particular. Just play around with it until you get something that you like. Yeah. And maybe it would be easier if we just add a mirror modifier so we don't have to do double the work. So I'm going to put one right through here. Right click, enter wireframe, vertices select, select these, and delete. Whoops, delete vertices. And now we can go back into object mode and add a mirror modifier here. And yeah, this is fine. So now when I go back, I only have to, whatever I change on this side will change on that side. And honestly, I think that looks pretty good, but if you want more customization, you can, add a loop cut, and I don't know, just play around with the chair. Start on the chair legs. So I'm gonna shift right click somewhere and add a cylinder. 16 vertices is fine. Then I'm gonna right click and shade smooth that and turn on auto smooth down here. Then let's go up here and inset and then extrude and then inset again and then extrude that. And then I'll just scale it up and just kind of adjust it to how it looks. Let's see, GZ. Okay, and for the wheel, I'm gonna go Control 3 to go into a side view. Then let's go into wireframe. I'm gonna Shift A and duplicate, and add a cube, and then just scale it down here and kind of put it in a shape that I want. So GY, SZ, and then kind of move it down and maybe make that a little like that. And let's just move it out a little bit. And let's just keep moving it out. Yeah. Now let's go back to object mode and add like a wheel holder thing. So let's add a cylinder and just scale it down. And I'll right click shade smooth that and turn on auto smooth. And let me duplicate that again and RY90 to rotate on the 90 degrees and scale it up. And this will be a wheel. So like follows. Let's go back into solid mode. We don't need a wireframe anymore. And let's just align this better. So yeah, let's thin this down. So SX. That might be a little bit too thin. Let's just put it in the center here. And let's scale this down as well. And then GX and just kind of line it up. This might be a little too small. So let's just adjust this. Now we also want that wheel cover thing. So let's go into this one, and to pick the shortest path from one to another, you can hold Control, and I'm guessing it's Command on Mac, and you can see it selects all the faces in between. So Shift D to duplicate, right click to cancel, GZ to move it up a little bit, and then Alt E extrude along normals, and then just bring it out a little bit. And so there we have our wheel cover and the wheel. Now what we can do is select this. Actually, yeah, it's already in the center, so select this and Shift S and then cursor to selected. It'll be in that origin point in the middle. Then you can come up here and change it to 3D cursor, which is that thing. And now notice when we select this stuff, I'm actually going to press Control J to join them. So now it's one object. And when I hit rotate RZ, notice that it rotates around the cursor. So what I can do now is Shift D, don't click anything, then hit R, then hit Z, then type in 60 since we want 6, and then still don't touch anything, hit Shift R, and it'll repeat the last action that you did. So just hit Shift R a bunch of times until you get a completed one. And if you want to just variety it, you can just RZ it again. And make sure you change this back to whatever you want instead of the cursor. So there we have it. Let's go back to the wireframe, select this, and just kind of line it up with our stuff. And yeah, so there we have our pretty cool chair. So let's start on our fish tank. I'm going to shift right click where I want my fish tank, add a cube, SX to, just scale it out as usual. And let's just make it bigger, and let's just bring it up. And I just want to scale it up on the Z a little more. And that looks good for the base. Let's go to face select, extrude out our top, and then extrude out a lid. And that looks like, looks kind of weird. So let me just bring this down a little bit. Okay, then what we can do is enter face select, hold Alt to select this loop cut, P, this loop, and then separate by selection with P. And now this is its own mesh. And let's just enter local view real quick and fill out this. Since our mesh is going to be transparent, we want to fill out this face here, but we don't need to fill out this because the camera will never see that. Okay, so I'm going to show you 3 ways to make low poly rocks. The first way is just to manually do it, so I'm just going to add a cube and enter edit mode and just subdivide it a bunch of times for more geometry. And then you can turn on proportional editing and just select vertices and kind of just move them around until you get something you like as like a low poly rock or something. The other way is to use the bisect. So if I add a cube here and go into edit mode, there's this thing called bisect tool. It looks like this. You can go here and you can also see the shortcut there for the default, but I'm just gonna click here. And now with the cube selected, you can just click and drag and slice, and then you can do clear inner or outer. In this case, it's going to be outer, and then just fill it. And you can see, and if you want to do it again, when you just slice again, and then clear inner, and then fill, to fill the faces. And then you can keep just going around and slicing it. And this seems to be pretty common. So just make sure you select all of it when you want to cut. And yeah, so yeah, you can see we already have like a low poly rock. Of course I didn't cut there, so it's kind of more square. But the third way that I want to show you is using the rock generator. So if you go to edit preferences and search in extra objects and check mark this box, if you go to Shift A, you can have the rock generator here, and you can see you have a lot of parameters to play around with your rocks and adjust them. And if you come to the modifier tab, you'll see how they actually made it, a bunch of subdivision surfaces and displacements. So just apply all of them with Control A. But if you go into edit mode, that's a lot of vertices for like a low poly rock. Whoops, sorry, I'm on the wrong tool. So what you can do is go into modifiers and decimate, and then just bring down the ratio. And then you can add another decimate modifier and do the same thing. And you can see it's like really low poly now. And if you hit Control A to apply them and go into edit mode, you can see the topology isn't that bad. And then you can just adjust them to how you want. But I mean, you already have a low poly rock right there. So let's start making an aquatic plant. I'm just going to Shift A and add a cube and give it a subdivision surface modifier and crank that up to 2. Then I'm going to right click shade smooth and just bring it up so I can see what I'm doing. Enter edit mode, and I want to be in face select for this, and just kind of make a general shape and add a bunch of loop cuts where I want to like have extrusions, so maybe like here, and extrude out, and then just move it and rotate it. So let's do RY and extrude it again. And yeah, so that's pretty much all there is to it. And then you can just keep extruding faces, whoops, like I'm doing, and rotating them. So RX, E, yeah, and just kind of shape it out how you want. So I guess maybe a loop cut here, and then I don't know, extrude out here. I'm not doing anything in particular. I'm just kind of finding out what works and experimenting. And on the edges here, you can select them and hit I to inset them, and then Alt E to extrude along normals and just bring them in. So there you have your really weird aquatic plant. You can put it, you can obviously make it look nicer, but that'll be good enough for me. Okay, let's make some seaweed. I'm gonna shift right click here and add a plane, RY to rotate it 90 degrees, and then just scale it to like a seaweed shape. Then I'm gonna add some loop cuts, so I don't know, that looks good. And let's add one down the center. And let's merge this at the center. And I don't know, just move these around in like an arbitrary shape of seaweed. I don't actually know how seaweed looks. And let's select this vertex, hold control and get all the ones in between and just move that back a little bit, I guess. Shade smooth, sure. And maybe let's give it a solidify just to give it something. Maybe turn on auto smooth here. Yeah. And let's just increase to solidify a little bit. Yeah, I don't think anyone can tell from far away, so that should be fine. And selection to cursor. Well, we should change the origin point, so let's just bring this up here. And now we can just do selection to cursor. Let's model a low poly fish. So I'm just gonna shift right click somewhere, add a plane RX90, and then go into a side view so I can see where it's at. Let's just go to wireframe and enter edit mode, and I'm just going to go and just extrude it 3 times, maybe 4th, and this will be the fin, and I'll just scale that up on Z, and this on Z as well, and this on Z a little bit, and maybe just scale this down. And yeah, I guess that's it for our low poly fish. Let's actually extrude these faces. So yeah, and let's give it a material, call it fish. Oh, and it's probably important to actually name this one, so it's called Plano 5. I haven't been organized, but this is going to be important, so let's rename it something. I'll rename it fish. So now it's fish. Yeah, okay. And let's give it a bevel modifier. Let's just change the material real quick. So let's give it a bevel modifier. Let's crank this up to like 4. Yeah, okay. That'll be our low poly fish. And we'll get to animation later. Start on a mini nightstand. I'm just going to add a cylinder, SZ to scale it down, and then just scale it out like so. And let's go into local view and just delete this face so we don't have to do it later. And get back out there. And then G, Shift Z, and just kind of move it. Let's do Shift Z. SC just a little bit. Okay, let's duplicate it down. And I'm just adjusting it here. Okay, now we can just duplicate this and also use it as a leg. So I'm just going to scale it down and just scale it up on the Z-axis arbitrarily. Let's position it to one of the legs here. And let's just move it down. Let's just scale it up. Now I want to enter edit mode and select this bottom loop here, and just scale it in a little bit. Awesome. Now we can come here, add a mirror modifier, and I'll select this one, and let's add one more mirror modifier, and also select this table, but instead of X we'll do Y. And yeah, so let's just adjust this a little more and put it near the edge. Let's model a mug. I'm just gonna shift right click somewhere and add a cylinder with 16 vertices is fine. Let's bring that up. And let's delete this bottom face because we'll never see it. So let's go and delete that. And then I'm going to shade smooth and then turn on auto smooth here. Then let's select this face, inset it with I, and extrude it down. And yeah, okay. Now we can go to a side view. It doesn't matter which side view. And just add a cube. So let's do a cube and scale that down. Let's go into wireframe. And let's go into edit mode. And let's just scale that down a little more. And then we can extrude this. And then G and then rotate it. Like so. And then we can do it one more time. And let's just move it and do it again. And let's do it again and just rotate it around. And yeah, so there's our handle. Let's go back to solid. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Then we can come here and give it a subdivision surface. And let's give it 2. And then let's create shade smooth. Now let's just scale it up a little bit. And GZ, GX. And I'm going to Control J to join these. And if you want to join objects, you have to make sure you apply the modifiers first. So now join it. And there's our mug. And let's just shift right click here. Shift S selection to cursor and scale it down and bring it up. Okay, let's make a clock. I'm just going to copy and paste from this one. So Shift D and then Shift S selection to cursor. And the back face is deleted, so we want to RX and then let's type 90. And whoops, let's undo that. RX 90 and then hit minus. No, flip the other 90-degree negative 90s instead. And then let's bring that out. And I realized I forgot to shade smooth this, so let's shade smooth and auto smooth. And let's do the same thing for these as well. So shade smooth, and turn on auto smooth. Then I'm going to enter a face and just inset it. And then extrude in just a little bit. Okay, so there's our clock. Then we can make the handles. And let's just Shift A and add a cube here. And let's go to a side view. I don't actually know which side view this is. Oh, it's 1. I guess it's Control 1. And then I'm going to go to wireframe and just scale it up. So X and then SC. And let me go to edit mode and move the origin point here. So now when I rotate it in object mode, it's like this. So let's just scale it down a little more. Now let's duplicate it. And then let's just make this one SXX to go to the local and make this longer. And let's make it a little more noticeable. So let's bring that down. And let's select both of them, enter edit mode, and just delete these faces back here. So for some reason, I can't select these. Okay, delete faces. Nice. Let's start modeling the mini floor. So I'm going to select the house thing and just select these 3 faces with Shift and Shift D to duplicate them and just move them out. Then I'm just going to scale it down arbitrarily. GY, GX. And you can see it's kind of slashed here. So what we can do is go into, oh, I forgot to separate them by selection. So make sure to separate it so it's its own mesh now. And let's go into edit mode and go into wireframe. Vertices select these and SX and then 0. And now they'll be flattened on the 0. And I think, yeah, these are already flat. Well, we'll never see this, but it doesn't really matter. Let's just do SY and 0, and that's also, now it's a square. Okay, so let's start on this lamp here. I'm going to Shift A and add a plane. And I'm just going to move it up a little bit. Then what we can do is enter edit mode and just extrude up. And then let's inset our face and just bring it in a little bit. And then let's extrude again with E. Like here, this is fine. And then let's extrude again, but right click to cancel and then just hit S to scale it up a little bit. And then let's just E to extrude again and scale that down. And then let's inset a little bit. And then let's E to extrude that out and then hit S to scale that out. Then let's E to extrude again, right click to cancel and then scale this one out. And let's E to extrude that. So maybe like something like this, and then S to scale that in. Like that. Then we can do one more inset and extrude out and scale that in. And the last inset, I to extrude in, inset, and then E to extrude. And then let's just scale that in. Yeah, so there we have the lamp pretty much. It's pretty good. Now let's select this loop here with Alt and getting the loop here. And let's hit I. And we press I again, and it'll make them not connected. And we can just eyeball it, so like this. And let's do Alt E along normals, and then just bring it in. Now I'm going to hit P and separate by selection. So this is a different object. Let's start on this mailbox. So let me go to a side view. Then I'm going to right click somewhere and just add a cylinder. RX to rotate it 90 degrees and 90. Then I'm going to enter edit mode, vertices, wireframe, and select these and just delete them. Then what I can do is select this with Alt and then just fill that. Then let's go back into side view and select these and then extrude down on Z to go to 0 like follows. Now let's select both of these faces and inset them like this. And now you'll notice that this part isn't supposed to be pink either. So we can fix that by selecting this edge and deleting it. And we can just move this down. So like follows. And we can do that trick again. So SZ0 and it'll flatten them out if we didn't get them flat. Okay. So now we can just select them again and E to extrude them down on Z. And this will be our brown part. Now let's go back to solid view and bring that out. So let's do shade smooth and turn on auto smooth. And let's see how we did by assigning some materials. So these will be, I'll just reuse some other ones that we already have. So let's see, I guess I'll just do key. And then let's select this loop here. So let's just select all of these. And let's add another material and give that book and assign that to there. And then let's just hit Alt to select this here and add another material and give it, let's just give it mini. And yeah, so there it is. Now we just need to cut out that hole there. So let's do Shift A, somewhere in there, add a cube, S, scale it down, SX, and that looks good. So we remember we can hit Control minus if you have the Boolean tools, or you can come here and with this selected, add modifier Boolean, and then select the object here, and with difference, and now you can hide this and it's gone. And there we have the mailbox. And of course, lastly, Shift S selection, cursor to selected. Let's just add a cylinder. Let's scale that down, scale that up, and GC, shade smooth, auto smooth, and yeah, so there we have our mailbox. Okay, so let's start on this flower thing here. I'm gonna shift right click somewhere and just add a circle and bring it up. Then I'm going to enter edit mode, hit F to fill, and then E to extrude that out. And then I'll do a subdivision surface. Let's put it up to 2. Right click shade smooth, and let's just scale that up a little bit on the Z axis. Awesome. Now we can start on our petal. So I'm going to shift A and add a plane and just scale that down and enter edit mode. Let's go to wireframe and just bring it. I want my origin point to the center, so we'll bring it here. And let's just E to extrude this and E to extrude this again. And let's just give it an arbitrary petal shape. We might need more loop cuts, so I'm going to give one more here. And let's just bring that out. And I'm going to scale this out in GX and move it out. Just scale it like that. So that will be our petal. Now let's give that a subdivision surface. Let's crank that up to 2. Yeah, that's pretty good. Actually, 1 is fine. And I'll just apply that. Now the last time we did this, so oops, let's bring this back up to the center here. The last time we had to make something go around the object 360 degrees was these legs, and I showed you the Shift R method, which I actually really like. But this one I'll show you the array object offset, which is pretty popular as well. So select this mesh and add a array modifier. Then instead of relative offset, uncheck that and do object offset. Open that and select this middle thing. And you'll see it's kind of glitching out here, and that's because we have to apply our scales. So I'm going to hit A to select everything, Control A, and apply scale. And now it's working. So if I crank this up, let's say to like 9, and when I rotate this, you can see what happens. It starts working. Now it's still not working because we need this to be in the center, so we can adjust it by moving it here. And now if you go to the side, you'll notice that, well, it's now going down. Well, that's also the issue. You just have to move this behind, just like that. And now you can see you have a flower. So, okay, so let's just adjust this thing. I'm just going to scale it down a little bit. And Control A, apply scale. Yeah, now let's edit this leaf here. So I'm just going to go into top view and just, I don't know, make it kind of look a little more like that. So SY, SY, SY. And yeah, I mean, you can use proportional editing. Maybe it will speed stuff up. Let's see. SY. Yeah. Okay, so there we have our flower. And I'm going to apply this one and these modifiers and then Control J to join them. So now it's one object. And just scale it down like follows. Maybe I should have gave the leaves a solidify modifier. I think we can still do that. So let's see, add a solidify modifier. Yeah, so it'll still work. And let's just shade smooth and turn on auto smooth. Okay, yeah, so for the stem, let's do Shift A and just add a cylinder. Well, actually, let's do Shift S selection to cursor. Wait, let's do cursor to selected. And let's just add the cylinder right here. So right here, scale it down and scale it up. GZ and S, Shift C. And this will be our cylinder, our stem. So right click, shade smooth. And if you want to deform it, you can just give it some loop cuts and move it. I have proportional editing on. So I'm just going to give this a bunch of loop cuts. Let me undo that loop cut, Control R. And let's go into wireframe. And I'm going to turn on proportional editing. And just, I guess, adjust it how you see fit. I'm not going to give, I'm not going to be too precise on that. So there's our flower, pretty much. And what we can do now is make the the other leaf. And this one's not as complex as the other leaf that we did earlier, so I don't think we need that good of topology. So I'm just going to shift right click and add a plane. And remember what we did last time, so we just kind of extrude it out. Whoops. X, yeah, X. And yeah, so make it smaller here and much wider on the edge. Let's turn off proportional editing for this one. That's why. Now we can just add one loop cut down here. And it looks like it's bent down, so I'm just gonna hit G and Z to move it down. And yeah, let's right click shade smooth. Let's give it a solidify modifier and some thickness. Then let's add a subdivision surface. And let's give it 2. Yeah, so that's pretty much our leaf. I guess if you wanted to, let's go to wireframe. And let's just select this edge loop and Control B to bevel it. And you can scroll up to make it more beveled, but I'm just going to give it 2 more, like this. And now it should be, yeah, you can see we have that defined line like they have there. Yeah, so their leaf actually goes a little more, it's a little more down, whatever, but yeah, that's pretty much the gist of our leaf. So let's go into edit mode and let's just adjust the origin point. So GX, put it there. And let's just shift right click and then selection to cursor, scale it down, shift D, and then RZ, and then GZ. Hello, welcome to the material section. So in this section, I just wanted to talk about some tips and tricks and the materials that I used. So here when we were modeling our flower, I pressed Control J to join them, but what I should have done was apply the materials and then join them. But now I have to deal with what I have here. So there's 2 easy ways to fix this. Let's go into edit mode and hold shift and just select a random vertice or a random face or a random edge of the loose parts of the mesh. Then you can hit Control L and let's add 3 materials. So 1 for the center, 1 for the petals, and 1 for the stem area. And I'll just do book 2, and this will be our stem. And then let's choose our petal. I'll just choose book 7 and then click assign. And now you can see all the ones that I selected are that. And then I can just click one in the middle here. Let's just go to face so it's cleaner, and then hit Control L. And let's just give that, I don't know, let's find something. Pen 2 and just assign that. And now you can see we have, whoops, we have our materials. Alternatively, let me get rid of these materials. You can go into edit mode and separate by loose parts. And now you can see all of these are their individual part. And you can just select them. And then with this active object, give that one the material that you want. So I think I was, let's just type it in book 7, yeah. And with this as the active object and all these selected, Control L and link materials. And now you can join them back. So obviously do the same thing for these and then join them back. But yeah, that's for that. And so let's just give this some random one, and let's give this like, I don't know, lamp, and then Control L, copy link materials, and now you can just select them, Control J, and now you can see you have your flower back. So if you want to see the materials that I'm using, it's just down, I drag down the specular and turn up the roughness, but obviously it depends on your scene. The default is 0.5 for specular and 0.5 for roughness, but if you want the materials that I'm doing, it's just random colors, and also bring down specular and bring up roughness. And when you're applying materials to things, just remember to also delete faces you'll never need. So I'll never need this bottom one here and the back of the computer and probably the bottom of this. So I'll just select those with Shift Select, and then I'll enter local view with slash on my numpad, and then hit tab to go into edit mode and wireframe, and then I'll just select actually let's go into solid so I can select through here and select this one and select this one. Then I can hit X and delete the faces, and you can see there's no more faces, but it didn't change what I'm looking at all. And then you can just exit local view, go back in object mode, and continue working. Also, if you have a difficult time like determining meshes, you can come up here and viewport shading. So this doesn't affect anything, it just affects how you see the world. You can come here and click random, and now each mesh will have a random color. You can also turn on cavity here, and you can see what that does. And you can also switch to these other options. Matcap is really popular, and basically you just pick one of these matcaps that work for you, I guess. But I'm just gonna stick with Studio and Cavity. You can always change it whenever you want. So pause the video now, add materials, and delete extra stuff. So let's give our fish a basic animation. Now we're just gonna do a really basic animation, and you probably should do it in JavaScript, but just know that you can do a lot more complicated Blender animation and export it in the same way. In future videos, I'll cover some more complex animations, but for this time, I'm just gonna keep it simple. So go from the layout tab to up to the animation tab, and so here's my fish. And I'm just going to press I to insert a keyframe, and I'll do location and rotation. Then I just want to make it go into like a square oval thing. So 240 frames is fine. This doesn't matter too much since we can change the timing in Three.js, but I'll just leave the default of 240. And 240 divided by 4 is 60, so let's go to 60. And let's just move the fish here, and then hit I to insert location and rotation. And I'm just going to slightly move it to Z, and we need to press I to insert that keyframe again. Then let's go to 120, and I'll bring it up here, and I'll rotate it 180. And now I'll insert location and rotation. And then let's go to 180 and move it up here. And I'll also insert, let's rotate it a little bit, and then insert location and rotation. And for this last one, since we want to make it loop perfectly, we can just copy and paste this. So Shift D, and then drag it to 240. And there's one last problem here, because if you see, when we play this animation, it actually flips that way, and we don't want that. And the reason for that is because you're going from 194 degrees back to 0 instead of the equivalent. So, and we can just come here and change this to 360 instead. And then insert location rotation again. And now you can see it's fixed. So I'm just gonna hit spacebar to play it, and you can see how it's looking. Now, of course, you can adjust this. You can, turn on auto keyframing and just start going wild with the animation. But yeah, I'm just going to keep it simple, and that's all for this part. So let's start preparing our screen. So I'm going to switch from object mode, from the 3D viewport to the shader editor, and make sure you click on use nodes. Then I'll hit N to close this panel, and then I'll zoom in right here. Then let's click on the screen. So click on the screen here and hit P to separate it by selection. Now this is the new plane that we're gonna apply our video texture to. So I want to keep it a separate mesh. So it's called cube 0.087. So If you're organized previously, you probably won't have to do this step, but let's just find it and rename it to screen so we can easily find it later. So now it's called screen. Yeah. And let me just make sure. Yeah, so that's our screen. Okay, now let's just prep the UV for it. I'm going to Shift A and search for an image texture. And then I'll just open an image. So I got this off of the internet. If you want to see my query, it's just 1920 by 1080 image, and I just downloaded this off of Google. You can see 1920 by 1080 there. And then I'll put my color into the base color here, and we can see how it looks. Now, we need to go to the UV editor, so drag out down another screen, and let's go. You can hit the middle mouse button to drag around this smaller menu here. And then let's go to the UV editor and take a look at our UV, and that looks pretty good. So you can see when I unwrap it, what happens. Our UV is kind of messed up, so we can fix that with just, SX, GX, and the whole, the classic stuff. And it actually looks like I accidentally rotated it, so we have to rotate 90, and then SY and scale it down. SX and scale it up. So to whatever resolution you want it to look. So now when we put a video with the same resolution on this screen in 3GS, it'll look, it won't be stretched at all. Of course, you can also edit the plane itself if you want to. Okay, but we're not going to export this material, so let's disconnect it now that we have our UV sorted out there. Now let's do it for this one as well. So I'm going to select, so this is just a cube with an inset face that I made it. And the center one has a material profile pick, and the frame is just profile. So in profile pick, you'll see our shader editor is now on that material. Let's do it again, and let's do image texture and open. And I just have this low resolution Pikachu image here. And I'm just going to select that, put it into base color. And your image might not update here, so you can come here and update it to that image. And now you can see the unwrap and how you can just play around with it. So sometimes when you rotate it here, it'll be upright in 3JS, and sometimes it won't. But yeah, you can just play around with this. So that'll be good enough for my UV. And maybe I just want to scale it on the x-axis here. Yeah, so that's pretty much it. And the last thing I want to do is bring back the hidden aquarium tank. So I'm going to hit Alt-H and just find this name, okay, Cube 68. And then let's undo that because I have other stuff that I hid. So let's hit Control-Z to undo that. And let's search for Cube 0, what? Cube 0.068, and let's open this back on and call it aqua glass or something. So yeah, and that's it. Yeah, that's it. So we have our screen and we have our aqua glass, and I think those are the only two main things that we want to target. Okay, let's get ready to export. So let's come up here and fix our normals first and select face orientation. And every face that you want to work properly should be blue. So I'm just going to select these objects with shift click and then enter edit mode and A to select all, and then Alt N, and then just hit flip, select flip here. And now those are blue, so we're good to go there. Now we can just, let's go into wireframe, select everything. Okay, and let's hit Control A and apply scale. Now, if something messes up when you apply your scale, it's probably one of your modifiers that you didn't apply that depended on scale to work properly. So with everything selected, let's go to File, Export, GLTF. And let's choose a GLTF binary. We can check this to remember our export settings. In include, we just want to limit to the selected objects. In transform, we'll leave this checked. In geometry, we'll do apply modifiers, UVs and normals, and export the materials. And we also want to check mark compression, and this will just reduce the file size of our model. And we're not going to touch with any of these options here. And in animation, we want to leave all of these checked as well. And then you can name your object final room and just export where you can find it later. In this section, we are going to be setting up our bundler. And if you don't know what a bundler is, basically it takes all your fancy development stuff and allows them to work together. And when you're ready to push to production, or in this case, the browser, you can run a build command and it'll start the build process. And the build process converts all your fancy development stuff into readable and optimized code for the browser. Even if you just used code that the browser can already use, you probably still want a bundler for the optimization. Now let me actually show you an example by going on his website himself. Here on one of his JavaScript chunks, and you can see it's one big line. No one actually codes like this, but it's extremely optimized. So if I come down here and select this formatting option, you can see now it's formatted and it kind of looks like code that someone would write. But when you investigate further, you'll notice that it's only the bare minimum. So example, variable names are single letters, and still no one actually codes like this, but this is the work of the bundler. And yeah, that's just a quick explanation of what a bundler does and why we need one. So I have my command prompt open and I'm on the vite.js docs, and Vite is going to be our bundler. I'm going to navigate to my D drive, but you can navigate to wherever you want to create your project. Then I'll enter my directory called tutorials, or basically enter my folder tutorials. And then I will create a new Vite project, and this will create the folder for us, so we don't have to actually create a folder. And I'll install that. Then I'll name this Boko tutorial. And then I'll just hit enter again. I'll select vanilla.js. And then I'll select vanilla. And this is vanilla TypeScript, but we just want regular. And now you can enter your directory that they created for us called Boko tutorial or whatever you named it. And then you can run npm install. And you can see when I go to my D drive into tutorials, you can see my Boko tutorial folder is right here that we just created. And you can see when I enter it, we have our project set up. And if you have VS Code downloaded, you can just do code dot and it will open into VS Code for us. Or you can just go into your VS Code, file, open folder, and navigate to the Boko tutorial folder or whatever you named it. Okay, so let's see what they gave us. So they gave us a node modules folder, and this just contains all our packages. You can see when we install 3.js, a new 3.js folder will show up in node modules. Now they also gave us a git ignore folder, and this kind of just tells Git not to push up these folders when we upload to GitHub. Then we just have a favicon SVG for the browser icon, index.html, main.js, and style.js. And then we have package.json, which will list our dependencies out, as well as our scripts. So let's start by installing 3.js as a dependency. So I type in npm install, or you can just type in I short for install, and then type in 3. And you can see now it's listed as a dependency. Now usually it doesn't really matter if you put it in this one or this one, and for us it doesn't matter either, but I'll keep them to development dependency just to show you how you would remove one. So I'll type in npm remove 3, which is the name of the package. And now you can see it's gone. Now you can remove packages several other ways. For example, you can do npm r or npm uninstall. They all mean the same thing, they just are different aliases. And let's do npm i3 and then --save -dev. And now I'll save it as a development dependency, and you can see it in there. Now if I come up to node modules folder, you can see now there's a 3JS folder here. And I brought up the open source repo, so 3JS is fully open source, just to show you what they gave us from here. So you see the source file, you have materials, geometries, cameras, all this other stuff. And when we come up to our source file, it's exactly the same. And I just wanted to point this out because it'll be useful when we're transferring things from this folder into our project that we need to do, like the Draco loader. Okay, so let's close the terminal. Let's head up to index.html. I'm going to hit Control X, which is cut on my hotkeys, but it just removes a line really easily for me. Then I'll do Shift Enter, and that adds a white space above. And then I'll do .experience. So create a div with the class name of experience. And inside of this div, I want to create a canvas element, canvas, and give this a class name of experience.canvas. And then when that's done, I can hit enter. And you can see we have our div and our canvas. So the canvas is where our 3JS scene lives. It's just like a painter's canvas, but for us, it's going to be a 3D painter's canvas. And then I just put a simple wrapper around it. So let's go to style.css, and we don't need any of this, so I'm going to get rid of that. Now, of course, we just need to do some resetting. So M0, and then P0 for padding 0, and then we want box sizing, and then border box. Okay, now let's target the div. So I'm going to do .experience, which is the class name for the div wrapper. And I'll do position fixed. And this will just keep it in place. So when we scroll or move around, it doesn't go anywhere. It stays on the screen. I'll do width 100 viewport width. So, it will take out the entire, it'll take up the entire viewport width. And then I'll do height. I also want it to take up 100% of the viewport height. That's all for that. Then let's actually target the canvas itself. Canvas. And then let's just set its height to width 100% and height 100%. So it's pretty much just taking this as itself. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to hit Control-Shift-S to save all. Your saving all files might be different. Check, you can come down here to the settings and then go into keyboard shortcuts and then type in search, save, and then all. And you can see my save all hotkey is Control-Shift-S. And if you want to customize it, you can just click on it and then hit edit and then enter a new desired key combination. Okay, so let's head up to main.js. Let's highlight this stuff and exit it out. We'll keep this because we never linked the CSS here, so let's leave this. Then let's create a new variable called constExperience. And I'll do equals new experience. And then pass in our canvas element, so document.querySelector, and then that'll be experience.canvas. Now 3JS needs the canvas, so we're passing in the canvas element by selecting it to this class. Now we haven't created this class yet, but this class will hold everything related to our 3JS experience. Okay, let's come up here and create an experience folder. And then let's create experience.js. Let's export the class, so export default class experience. Let's give it a constructor. And this will take in that canvas element that we passed in here. And then it will just set this experience's variable named canvas to the canvas that we passed in. And then let's go back to main.js and import this. So import experience from //, and then experience, and then experience.js. Let's go back to experience.js and let's just do console.log. hello world, just to make sure it's working. Okay, so let's launch our development server. And if you go to package.json, you can see the script for it is dev. So let's open control tick to open the terminal. And then let's do npm run dev. Now you can see I have a local dev server at here. So I'm just going to copy this and then go to it. And now you can see we have our dev app. And then I'll hit Control Shift I to open the console. And you can see hello world is here. It's being outprinted by experience.js. Okay, so let's go to 3js.org, go to their documentation and creating a scene. Now, if you're completely new to 3JS, I highly recommend you read through this and play with 3JS on your own before continuing on to this video. For now, I'm just going to come down here and copy and paste the So I'm going to Control C, then I'm going to highlight console log and just replace it over and then save it. Now let's come back to our Vite app, and you can see we have uncaught reference error, 3 is not defined. So let's come to the start, Shift Enter to give some white space, and then let's do import everything as 3 and then from 3. Now because we have a bundler, we don't need to type the path in node modules to 3. It will automatically type that path for us. We just have to give the name. And now you can see everything works. But we have an error here, and I've never seen it in my life, but it says 2 output files share the same path but have different contents. So this might suggest that our package.log.json file was messed up when we were transferring dependencies between the two. So let's delete this package.log.json, and then let's exit the live server with Control C, and then let's do npm install, and this will reinstall our dependencies. And then let's do npm run dev again and see if that fixes the situation. And now you can see I no longer have that error. It was just something messed up with package.log.json not updating when we were transferring our dependencies. Okay, so let's start splitting it up. I'm going to be using the singleton method that I learned in Bruno Simon's course. Now, I'll have some slight modifications, but if you came from Bruno Simon's course, it's pretty similar. So we'll be using the singleton design pattern, and this just ensures that a class only has one instance, and that class has global access. So here I've split up our starter code into several JavaScript files. Each of these JavaScript files plays a specific role. For example, the cube will take care of the cube setup, and the camera will take care of the camera setup. But if you look at the code, a lot of these things are dependent on each other. For example, the renderer needs the scene. It also needs the camera as well as the sizes in order to complete its role. Because all of these things are in separate files when we split up our code, it needs to access them somehow. And to access the stuff in these other files, it would look something like this. So you would import that class that you need stuff from, and then you would instantiate it here so you can use it. But take a look here between cube and sphere.js. Both of these need to access the scene. So what do? They import the scene and then create a new scene so they can access the scene. But when you make a new instance of the scene, it's no longer the same scene that it used to be. It's a completely new one. Imagine every time you created a new mesh, you created a new scene. You'll just lose your old mesh that you added to the old scene since you just created a new scene. So you can solve this by making scene.js a singleton. That way, every time you call new scene, for example, in cube and sphere, it doesn't actually create a new scene, but returns you the original one you first instantiated. This way, I can add more of these and keep calling new scene and adding to getting the same exact scene, not a new scene, and adding all my meshes to that same scene. So for every shared resource that is impacted by multiple instantiations, for example, the scene, we could make them a singleton. Well, this kind of defeats the purpose of trying to split up our files into messy code because we'll have a bunch of imports in each file. However, this is where experience.js comes in. Experience.js will be our singleton and has access to all these other files. As a result, all these other files will only be instantiated once as well. Since it's a singleton that is globally accessible, all these classes no longer have to talk to each other. They can just ask experience.js what the other classes have in order to get what they need in order to complete their roles. So then it'll look something like this in pseudocode. All you have to do is import experience, and then you can just get the scene from experience. Here you can get the scene from experience, and experience will always only return that first instantiated scene. This might not make any sense currently, or maybe I explained it poorly, but it'll start to click once we start coding it out. Let's create our singleton design pattern with experience. I'm just going to get rid of all of this starter code. So let's create a static instance variable. And if experience.instance exists, then we can just return that instance. So if this is true, if this exists, we just return and nothing down here executes anymore. Otherwise, if it does not exist, experience.instance equal this. And what this does, it just sets everything down here into this variable. So the next time we call a new experience, it'll be true, and then it'll just return it, and nothing down below here will execute. Okay, so let's create our first utility function. I'm going to come up to experience.js and type in utils to create a utilities folder, and the first one I want to do is size.js. So let's do export default class sizes. Whoops. Sizes, and then let's give it a constructor. The main thing I want to do is give the width, so equals window.innerWidth, and this .height equals window.innerHeight. Because our canvas takes up 100% of inner width and inner height of the window, I'm just going to select the window, but you might want to select your canvas if your canvas's width and height if your canvas does not take up 100%. Okay, we also need this aspect ratio for our camera, so I'm going to do that, and this will be this width divided by this height. Now on resize, we want to update these values, so let's do window.add event listener on resize. Whoops. Just update these values, and we can just copy and paste that here. Now I also forgot to set the window pixel device ratio, so let's do that right now. I'm going to do this pixel ratio. Whoops. Equals math.min window.pixel ratio, and then 2. And this should be device pixel ratio. Device pixel ratio. And this is just a min function to select the lower one. So if this is 3, it'll pick 2, and if this is 1, it'll pick 1. And we also want to update that as well. And the reason we have this min function here is because going higher than 2 doesn't really have any benefit, so we'll just leave it at 2 at the maximum and a minimum. Okay, so now we can import sizes into our experience. So import sizes from /util/size.js. Now it depends on your bundler, but you might not even have to put .js. I just put it just to be safe. I forgot if Vite needs the .js or not. Then we can set this one. This experience is variable. This .sizes equals new sizes. Okay, next let's just create our scene real quick, and I'll do that. And we don't have to split this into a separate file because it's just one line. Let's go back out of the utils folder and start creating our camera.js file. So I'll do export default camera. Export default class camera. And let's do that. Give it a constructor. Like so. So the camera needs the sizes It also needs the scene, and we're going to be using a tool called orbit controls, and that needs the canvas. So remember, we can just get it from experience because it has it all for us right here. So let's import experience. I'm going to come up here, shift enter, import experience ./experience.js, and then just set this .experience equals to new experience. And then I'll set this .size equals to this .experiences.sizes. So essentially, we get the experience, and the experience has the sizes here from this file here. So it's all good. We also want the scene, so this .scene equals this .experience.scene. And then we want the canvas, so this .canvas equals this whoops, I've been putting this .experience.canvas. So let's just make sure we're getting this stuff first. So let's go to experience.js and import the camera. So this is not going to be a utility function, so I'm going to put a space in between. So import camera from ./camera.js. Then let's come down here and do this .camera equals new camera. Whoops. Now open your terminal with control backtick, and if your Vite server is still running, you can go there. But if it's not, you can run npm run dev, which is in the package.json. So let's go to my local host here and make sure I save my files. And it looks like we have no errors, that's good. So let's go to camera.js real quick and console.log this .sizes, this .scene, this .canvas. And you can see we have the scene, we have the canvas, and we have sizes. And let's also log out this .experience. And you can see our experience has the camera, the canvas, the scene, and the sizes. Very, very awesome. Okay. Now I'm going to create two cameras. We only need one, but you'll see why I create two cameras. The second camera that I create will be helpful for us when we start with the pathing. So let's start. I'll do this create perspective camera, and that'll be a function. And then I'll do this create orthographic camera. And this is the one we're going to be using because that's the one that Boko used. Okay, so let's just do it. Let's do create perspective camera. And this perspective camera equals new 3 perspective camera. And then we can set those defaults. So I'll do 35 field of view. You can see for us, it pops up here, so that's really helpful. Then remember, we have the aspect ratio already. So what we can just do is this .sizes .aspect, and then we can do 0.1 and then 1000. This is the near and far numbers, and we can always change it later. Okay, so now let's add the perspective camera to the scene. Remember, we have the scene here. So let's come down here, this .scene .add this .perspective camera. Now let's copy and paste this, but let's create an orthographic camera instead. Oops. Let's come here. You can hit Control D to select the next instance of that, and then just type in orthographic camera. And my artificial intelligence is messing up, so let's just get rid of that. And then new 3 orthographic camera. Then it takes different values. Okay, so let's set a frustum size for our orthographic camera. I'm just gonna call it this .frustum, and I'll set it to 5 for now. So let's set the left view to be negative this .sizes .aspect times this .sizes .the frustum, and then divide that by 2. And then let's do the same for the right one, except this one will be positive. And then let's set the top value. So this will be this dot sizes dot frustum divided by 2. And then the bottom one will just be the same thing but negative. So let's just do shift alt down arrow, and then you get the negative. And then we need the far and near values again. So let's just put it at negative 100 and 100. And then I'll save that. And let's check periodically to make sure I get no errors. And this is 3 is not defined. So indeed 3 is not defined. Let's do import all as 3 from 3. And now if we go back, there are no errors. Okay, so we also need to update this stuff when we resize our screen. So I'm just going to click here and hit Alt with Alt down and click again to get 2 cursors. Copy and paste this and then create a resize function and just post those in here. And I'll do the update the aspect ratio of this camera, and I'll just set it equal to this dot size dot aspect. And for this dot orthographic camera, I have to reset the left value, and let's just Control Shift down arrow to quickly get more. So let's do top and then bottom. And then we can just set it to what we put up here. So let's do the left to the left, the right to the right. And let's get rid of these and save that. Now we also need to update the projection matrix for both of these cameras. So this dot perspective camera dot update projection matrix. And let's just copy and paste that, and then change it to orthographic camera instead. Let's just put some comments. Updating perspective camera on resize, and updating orthographic camera on resize. And since we're going to be using orbital controls, we also need an update function. And I'll get back to this later, but let's just put it here for now. Okay, so I'm going to hit Control A and Control C to copy everything. And let's work on our renderer. So I'm going to call that renderer.js. And I'm just going to paste this stuff in here and change this to renderer. And of course, let's get rid of these functions. Now let's keep resize. Okay, so the other thing that our renderer needs, in addition to all this stuff, is the camera. So this dot camera equals this dot experience dot camera. Then let's do this dot set renderer, and this is the function that will be setting up our renderer. So let's copy that. Oh, let's copy that and give it an enter here. So this dot renderer equals a new 3 dot WebGL renderer, and we want to give some parameters here. So we need to pass in the canvas, and that's going to be this dot canvas that we got from experience. And then we want to turn on anti-alias so we don't get those jagged, edgy lines. Then I'm going to quickly go through some parameters that I'm going to set up for the renderer. So I'm not going to explain these in depth, but Three.js has like really good documentation on each of these settings. For example, tone mapping. I'll be setting one of these. You can play around with your examples and just take a look. Sometimes the name is more than descriptive enough. For example, tone mapping, it's kind of like the tone. And then you have the exposure, which you can play with, and this is kind of like the brightness. Same with another one we're going to be used, like physically correct lights and stuff like this. So I'm not really going to explain each one, but they help contribute to our scene in some way. So I don't want to bore you typing out all these settings, so I'm just going to paste them, and you can copy them. And if you don't understand any of these, you can leave some comments down below, or you can read the documentation on what they actually are. So here we just getting physically correct lights. Here we're putting out some encoding, some tones, some exposure. We're enabling shadows and setting the type of shadow. And then we're just setting the size of the renderer and its pixel ratio. So of course we also need to do this for resize. So when it resizes, let's update this stuff. Okay, and in this update function, I'm gonna put my this.renderer and tell it to render. Remember we had the request animation frame in that regular one. So we have to pick a camera to render. And I'm just going to pick the perspective one for now. So remember we named it perspective camera. So this.camera just points to this class. And to get the class variable, we also have to do .perspective camera. So we can just console.log this real quick. So console.log this.camera, and then this.camera.perspective camera. And let's go back here. And I didn't print it out because it's never being called anywhere. So let's just do this, and then Control D, and then type in renderer. And then let's just shift alt down, new renderer, and then renderer. And here you can see what we logged. We logged the camera, and inside that camera we have all that other stuff, and we have our perspective camera, which is what we selected with the dot notation, and now we printed out that as well, and that's what that is right there. So very cool. Okay, so let's create another utility function called time.js. I'm going to select this folder and call it time.js. And then I'm going to come into sizes and just Control A to paste it in here and get rid of everything in this constructor here. So let's start by setting the start time. So this is the time that the experience was initiated. And then let's set the current time. So the current time is going to be this.start on initiation. And then we'll have the elapsed time. And this is the elapsed time that has been passing since we started the experience. And I'm going to currently set that to 0. And then we'll have the delta time. And this will be the time between each frame. And I'll set it to 16 seconds. And this is because this is about the amount in milliseconds between each frame at 60 FPS. Then let's start this.update. And then let's create an update function here. Oops. Update. And here we're going to do our window.request request animation frame. And we want to do this.update and then .bind this. Now you can also just use an arrow function to keep the context. So you can also do this update.this. This.update, sorry. Whichever you like. Okay, so let's update our time. So I'm going to do, let's do a const, and I'll call it current time equals date.now. And then let's calculate delta, this.delta time equals current time minus this.current. So by creating this here, we get the time 1 after this.current between the frame. So we just subtract those times, and then we get the delta time between each frame. And then after that, of course, we need to update the previous one so it matches on each window request animation frame. And then for the elapsed time, so let's say you wanted to play an animation 5 seconds after the 3JS scene started. This is what elapsed time is for. So this.elapsed equals this.current, which is the current time, minus this.start, which is the starting time, which is this, what we set up here. So let's console.log this stuff. Let's do delta. And let's come back into experience and import that so we can take a look at it. So I'm going to come here, time, and let's put it up here. So this.time equals new 3. Oh, whoops. New time. Okay, let's go to our dev server and refresh. And for some reason, it's only printing once. Let's see. So, oh yeah, this should be time. Let's save that. Still printing once. Let's see. Um, oh, I think this needs parentheses. Yeah, okay, so yeah, there we have it. And you can see when we subtract the current time from the previous current time, it's about 16. And that's why um, I just put it here. Now this is already updating itself because of the request animation frame. And we don't want to put another one in each of these since we already are having it. So for example, we wouldn't want to put another window request animation frame to keep updating this one. We just want to use the one that's already in here. So how do we do that? How do we tell these other classes to update with this request animation frame? So how do we do that? Well, we can use something called an event emitter, and basically it just emits events that can be listened to and acted on. So for each update, we want to emit an event, and then listen to that event so we can do some actions in the other classes. Luckily for us, Node.js provides a really convenient event emitter. And it's supposed to be built in and come with Node.js, but for some reason it doesn't work for me. So I have to come here and install events. And you can see right here, it says you usually do not have to install events yourself. But for us, well, for me at least, we have to install this. So let's open my terminal. And I'm just going to create a new one. I don't want to cancel my server. Now let's do npm I events and then -s save -dev. And then let me close my terminal. And if I go to node modules, you can see I have events here. You can see there's events here. And we want to use their event emitter class. So event emitter. You can see it's one of their exports in their file. Okay, so let's go here and export default class time and extends event emitter. And of course we need to import that as well. So let's get that module. So event emitter from events. Remember, since it's in our node modules folder, we don't have to write a path to there. And let's save that. And if we go to the documentation, if you want to emit a message, you use the command emit. So now that we're extending from event emitter, if we go to the browser, you can see must call superconstructor. So this will give us access to the stuff in event emitter. We can just do this.emit, and we can give this any name we want. I'm just going to call it update. So now let's go to experience.js. And in here, we'll do this.time.on. So .on listens to that event that we created. And we named it, I forgot what we named it. So you can hit Alt back arrow to go to the previous area your cursor was at, and left and right like follows. So, what did I call it? Oh, update? Okay, yeah, so this.on update. I want to do something, and I'll call the experience.update. So when time is updating, I want to update all the other stuff that have updates as well. So I'll put that in a separate function in experience, and I'll just call this.update. And then let's create that function. So this.update. And whoops, sorry, getting too fast here. And in this update function, we have camera, and it will call this one, and it will also call this one as well. So let's do this.camera.update, which calls this one right here, and we don't have anything in here yet. And then let's do this.renderer.update, which will call this one right here. Okay, let's go to the browser and make sure we have no errors. And now you can see our screen is black, which means we got a render and it's working. That's great. Now, notice when we resize our browser, the sizes aren't updating. So we can do the same exact thing with sizes. Let's go to sizes. let's just copy this stuff and let me shift enter. Import event emitter from events, extend event, extends event emitter. Okay, and remember to call super so we can access the event emitter stuff. And let's do this dot emit, and let's call it resize. So when the window is resizing, emit this event. And experience, let's do this. It'll be this dot sizes this time. And on resize, let's do this dot resize. And then let's just copy this. And this will be called resize. I like having my update function at the bottom, but let's just move this up. I'm gonna hit Alt up arrow to move this up a line. And now let's call this resize instead. Okay, so now it will call the resize here every time we resize, and it'll call the resize here every time we resize as well. So let's make sure that works and resize our window, and you can see it works properly. Now let's go back to time.js and get rid of this console.log. So let's set up a world class, and this will contain all the stuff like our house mesh and our floor mesh into a single class that we import into experience, and this will just make our life a little bit easier. So I'm going to come to the experience folder and create a new folder called world, and let's create a class called world.js, and I'm just going to copy one of these classes. So let's just copy the renderer, and let's clean this up. So highlight this, let's highlight this stuff. Yeah, let's get rid of that function, and yeah, I'll just leave it like this for now. And we have to adjust this path because we are one directory in, so we have to go back one directory. And yeah, so there, let's change this to world. And now let's make one for our room. So room.js, and I'm just gonna copy world and put it in room, and I'm gonna leave it like this for now and call it room. So I'm gonna quickly go to the docs and copy and paste this cube here, and I'm just gonna put in the constructor just so we have something to see. And let's do this.scene.addCube. Of course, we need to get that scene from the experience class, right? So this.experience equals this.scene equals this.experience.scene. Of course, this is the same scene, so we add the cube to that scene. And now we can import it here. So let's do import room from ./room.js. And down here, let's just do this.room equals new room. And then come down into experience.js and import world. So import world from ./world/world.js. And then make sure order does matter here, so make sure to put it below everything else. So this.world equals new world. And now let's save all our files and go back to our app. So no errors, but we can't see our cube, and that's probably because our camera is positioned too close to it. So let's just pick this perspective camera, and let's just do position.z equals 5. And now you can see we're 5 units away in the z direction, so towards our screen, and now we can see our cube here. Okay, so let's begin by importing our static assets, which is going to be our video texture, as well as our model that we exported from Blender. So the way Vite handles static assets is creating a public folder. So I'm going to make a public folder, and in here I'm going to create 2 folders, one for models, and go back to public, and then another one for textures. And then navigate to the place that you saved your models, and you can pick whatever video you want. So I have a really low quality video of Pop Stars KDA from League of Legends. So that's going to be my MP4 file, and I'm just going to click and drag that into textures because it will be a video texture. And this is the one that we exported together from Blender. So let's click and drag that file into the models. Okay, so let's close these tabs. The hotkey is just Control W. So just to clean up the tabs real quick. Okay, so let's come up to our utilities function, and I'm going to add a new file called assets.js. And this will hold a list of our assets, the name of the asset, the type of the asset, and the path to that asset. So it'll be an array with a bunch of objects. So the first one will be name, and I'll call our GLB model. I'll give it a name of house. You can name it whatever you want. Actually, room, sorry. And you can name it whatever you want. I'll give it a type. I'll call it GLB model. And then I'll give it the path there to that area. So this is the path that the loader needs when you're loading models. So that's what this is going to be. And because of Vite, we don't have to put public here. We just do /models / finale.glb. So when we put in this path to the loader, Vite will automatically take care of that public pathing there. Okay, so let's just do the video texture. So I'm gonna give it the name. So let's just make this bigger so you can see. I'm just gonna copy and paste this. And I'll call this screen for the computer screen. And then the type here will be a video texture. And then we want to do texture. Did I call it textures? Yeah, textures. So textures and then KDA. And don't forget to change the file extension to match. Okay, so there we have our assets. Okay, now let's go to the utilities again, and then create a new class called resources.js. And this will load all our resources and store it. So whenever we want to access like the GLB file, you can just access it from the resources class that has already loaded it. So I'm going to go to sizes and just copy and paste this. Let me just expand this so we can see what we're talking about. And I'll do resources here. And we want the event emitter, and you'll see why soon enough. And let's get rid of this. And we also need to import the experience so we can get the renderer. And you'll see why in a little bit. So this dot experience equals new experience. And then this dot renderer equals this dot experience dot renderer. Okay, so we need to grab these this array here somehow. So let's go back to experience.js and import resources. So let's do that. Let's Control D, Control D, and then type in resources. And then below the renderer and above world, let's do this dot resources equals new resources. And then let's pass in assets here. And then we also need to import assets. So let's do that. So import assets from utils assets.js. So we imported assets from here, and we're just passing it to this class right here. So we can grab that here. So assets. And then let's just set a class variable, this.assets equals assets. Now if we console.log this, we should see that array of objects in our browser. And indeed we do. You can see we have that first object with the name, the path, the type, and we have that second object with the name, the path, the type. Okay, let's get rid of this, and then let's create an object. And this will hold all our loaded items. And we will import this resources into these other classes and use this object with all the loaded assets to access them. Okay, so let's have a queue. So I'm going to do this.queue equals this.assets.length. So this would return 2 because we have 2 assets. And this is just letting us know how many items are in queue to be loaded. Then we needed the loaded counter itself. and we're just gonna set it to 0 because nothing's been loaded yet. Okay, let's do this dot set loaders to set our loaders, and this dot start loading to start loading. So I'm gonna double click those, copy, Control C, and then let's just paste them like so. Okay, I'm gonna set another loaders object, and this will just contain our loaders. Okay, in order to load a GLB file, we need the GLTF loader. So let's come up here and import the GLTF loader. I'm gonna import GLTF loader, and this will be from 3/examples/JSM/loaders/GLTF loader.js. So if we come to the repo, so let's go to the 3.js repo. Let's check 3, and then let's go to examples. And then we want to use the JSM version. And let's go to loaders. And you can see we have the GLTF loader here. And we also want to do the same thing for the Draco loader. So we can just do Shift Alt down arrow to copy that, and then just change this stuff into Draco loader. Oops, should be all capital. Draco, and then loader. So now we are importing this. And one last thing we need to do to use this effectively is come into node modules and go into the 3 folder. Let's go into examples, JS, and then let's go to libs, which is short for libraries. And then you can see this Draco folder here. And what you want to do is select that folder, hit Control C, then we can close the 3 folder, and then select our public folder and hit Control V to paste that entire folder right there. Okay, so now let's set up our loaders. So this .loaders.gltf loader equals new GLTF loader, and let's add another loader, and this .loaders.draco loader equals new Draco loader, and this loader. Then we need to set up some stuff for the Draco loader. So this .loaders, and grab that Draco loader that we just created, and we want to set its decoder path. So set decoder path, and it's right here into the Draco folder, and we don't have to do the public, so we can just do /Draco. Yeah, /Draco. Then we need to assign the Draco loader to this GLTF loader. And the reason we're using a Draco loader instead of just GLTF is because we exported with compression in Blender. So if you remember when we went up here to File Export GLTF, in Geometry we turn on compression, and if you actually hover over it, you can see right there Draco mesh compression, compress mesh using Draco. Okay, so this .loaders.gltf loader, so grab that GLTF loader and set the Draco loader to it. So this .loaders, and that will just be our Draco loader that we created. Now we don't need a separate loader for the video, but we pass it here anyway so we can get it all in the list of items and the queue. Okay, so now for each of our assets, we're going to check the type of the asset, and then we're going to give it its appropriate loader and then put it into the items. Now you might be wondering, why did we do all of this if we only have 2 assets? Well, it makes life really easy if you want to easily add another one, and especially if you have more loaders, for image textures, cube textures, basis textures, and you have all these different loaders for each different item. Honestly, you could even split the loaders into their own file if it gets too big. So for us, this seems like overkill, but it's good to structure code in a good way. Okay, so enough chat. Let's go loop through each of our assets. So for const asset of this .assets. So remember, assets is everything in here. If asset, and then because the asset is an object, we can just use dot notation and grab the type. If asset dot type equals GLB model. Oops. If the asset type equals GLB model, then let's pick the GLTF loader. So we can just copy and paste this line here. And then we can tell it to load. And then we want the asset.path. So remember, the asset.path is right here. And then we can provide a callback for the loaded file, which is file, and pass it into another function that we'll create right after, single asset loaded. And I'll pass in the asset itself. So that's just each of these objects. And I also want to path it. And then I'll also pass in the loaded file. And whoops, this should be single asset loaded. Okay, so let's create this function real quick. And this function will create key value pairs for us in our items object. And this will just make our life a little bit easier. So let's grab the asset and file. And then let's do this.items, and then asset.name. So we're grabbing the asset's name. Remember, each one of these is an asset, and then we're just grabbing its name. So that'll be our key, and the associated thing will be our loaded file or our loaded asset. So we have key value pairs here. Let's also increment our loader count. So this dot loaded ++. Remember, we set that to 0 up here. Okay, so now we can check if this dot loaded equals this dot queue. And if this is true, it means all of our assets are loaded. And we want to create the world when our assets are loaded. So how do we make other classes react to this event? Well, that's why we have our event emitter here, because we want to emit this event. So let's just do this.emit ready. Let's come back up here to this if statement and do an else if the asset.type equals video texture, which is right here. So we don't have a loader for the video texture, but we need to perform some operations in order to use a video texture in Three.js. So here's their demo. In order to use a video texture, you need a video HTML element, and you can see they have it here. And when they create their texture, you can see they grab the element by ID as video, and then they create the video texture from that DOM element. So I don't want to hard code that in my index.html, because imagine we had multiple videos. You could just list them in assets and automatically create them, generate them in resources, instead of having to manually create them in your HTML. Okay, so let's just using, create element, typical JavaScript, to create the div element. Okay, so let's create two objects, and these will just be dummy objects to help us. And let's do this dot video texture equals. So video will hold everything related to the HTML part, and this will just hold stuff related to the Three.js configuration for video textures. So what we can do is do this dot video and create a key value pair asset.name equals document.create element, and we want to create the video HTML element. And then let's set some parameters for this HTML element. So I'm going to just shift alt down arrow like 5 times. And so for this video asset.name, let's set its source equal to asset.path. So we're just setting its source to asset.path. Then let's make it plays inline equals true. Let's make it autoplay. You can not, this is an optional setting if you don't want to do autoplay. And I'm just going to set that to true. And then I want to set it to loop automatically. So dot loop equals true. And then I just want to play this. So dot play. Then from this div element, we want to create that video texture. So this dot video texture, we'll pick that asset name again, and I'll put it new 3 dot video, video texture. And then we can just pass in our video, which is going to be this dot video dot asset dot name. This will be our div element. Then let's set some stuff for a video texture. So I'm going to do this dot video texture dot asset dot name, and depending on how you did your UVs, you might not have to flip this. We'll see it when we put it onto our screen, if this should be true or false. Then let's set some filters. So I'll set the min filter. Let's set the mag filter. Let's generate bitmaps to false. And let's do encoding and set it to that 3.sgbe encoding. Let's do 3 dot nearest filter. And let's do the same thing with here. So this should be mag. And this should also be nearest. Okay, let's go back to our browser just to make sure we don't have any errors. And it says this dot loaders dot gltf loader dot loaders is not a function. So let's see what the problem here is. And the problem is this should be all capital. Let's go to console. And 3 is not defined, so let's import all from 3. Let's just find where we have one and just copy and paste that. Shift that, save. Let's see if we get any errors. And we have a Draco error. So let's go back to resources. And I think I need this slash here actually. And yeah, so that's good. Okay, so what is this error? Play failed because the user didn't interact with the document first. Let's just copy and paste that and see if we can get something from Google. Accept all cookies. To make autoplay on HTML works, you just need to add the muted property. Okay, oh, okay, yeah. So let's just shift alt up arrow here to copy that line and change muted and set it to true. So does that work? Yeah, it solves our error. So Stack Overflow to the rescue. Okay, so let's make sure we're actually getting our files. So I'm going to do console.log file. Let's print out the file. Okay, so nice, we're getting our GLB file. You can see, let me zoom in here. You can see we're getting our GLB file. That's good. Now, where is our video file? Oh, that's because I never caught this again. So let's put it in here. Let's just find that, paste this here. And we want to pass the video texture, so we can just copy and paste this instead of file. Now let's console.log and see what happens. Okay, yeah, so we get our video texture and we get our GLB file. Okay, so remember we want to create the world when the assets are all ready. So let's listen to this event and create the world when everything is loaded. So we can come to world and we can just do this dot resources equals this dot experience dot resources, and remember that's from here. So experience, remember new resources here. And then when this dot resources on ready, so from the event emitter, and sorry, it should be this dot resources dot on ready. Let's create the world. In this case, all our world so far has this room. So let's just Control X and paste it in there. So now when the resources are ready, our room will be created. So let's console.log this, created room, and let's go back into assets resources and console.log asset is loading. And then let's console.log all assets are done. All assets are done. And let's save that and go into the browser. And now you can see asset is loading, asset is loading. So this is true. Then it logged all assets are done, which is what we see here. All assets are done. And then just listen to it. So we created a new room, and then it logged out created room. And this is the order we expect, and that's great. Okay, so let's get rid of the console.logs that we did. And let's go to room. Okay, so let's get rid of our dummy cube, and let's actually get the room GLB file that we loaded. So we'll do this.resources equals this.experience.resources, and then this.room equals this.resources.items.room. So remember when we came in resources here, we gave items the key value pair, which is asset name, which is here. So what we're doing here is we're getting the items object with all our items in there, and then we're using dot notation to get the room. So let's do console.log this.room, and we should see our GLB file. Cannot read properties of undefined reading items. Oh, this should be, I misspelled it. This should be resources. And yeah, you can see it's outprinting from room.js, and we have our scene here. Now here we get a lot of things, but we actually just want the scene itself. So let's just do this dot actual room equals this.room.scene, and let's console this.actual room. And now you can see we have our group, and in our children we have our 154 meshes that we created in Blender. So let's actually try to look at this. So I'm going to expand the window here, and let's actually take a look at this. And you can see our names are here. And if you open these arrays, you can see all our meshes exactly how they were in Blender. So look, cube 20, we have fish, we have cylinder 013, plane 007, and that's just everything, here. So, and there's our fish, and there's our fish here. It's between cylinder 16, plane 005, plane 005. Very, very awesome. Okay, so let's create a function, this.setModel. Let's just do this.scene that we got from the experience, and then .add this.actual room. And let's save that and go back to our browser. And we can't see anything because we need to add some lights. So let's go to world and create a new file called environment. And this will deal with things related to lighting and environment. And then I'm just going to copy and paste this and call it environment. And we don't want any of this stuff. Then let's call set sunlight here. Then let's create a new sunlight. So new sunlight equals new directional light. And let's just make it white. So hashtag FFF, and then let's put an intensity of 3. Then let's tell this light to cast shadows. So cast shadow equals true. Then let's set up its shadow camera. So we can always adjust these later. I'm just gonna set it to 20. Then let's set the quality of these shadows. So shadow.mapsize.set. And let's just do 1024 by 1024 or 1K currently. And if it's too pixelated or messed up, we can increase this later. Then let's give it some normal bias. equals 0.05. And then let's just set a position for now. I don't actually know where it's going to be, but let's just put something arbitrary. Okay, and then let's add it to the scene. This dot scene dot add this dot sunlight. Okay, so let's see if we can see our mesh. And oh wait, yeah, well, we need to instantiate this first. So let's go into room and world, and let's import environment, and this dot environment equals a new environment. So let's save all our files. And now you can see our mesh here. So we're either way too close to it or it's way too big. Let's just go to camera for now and instantiate our orbit controls. Okay, so let's import orbit controls. Let's do import orbit controls. And I forgot the path. Let me check real quick. Node modules. Let's go to 3. I know it's examples JSM. Okay, controls. Yeah, okay, so orbit controls is here in this path. Let's do from 3/examples/JSM/controls/orbit controls.js and save that. Now let's create another function, and this will just instantiate our orbit controls. So set orbit controls, and let's go just down here and do set orbit controls. Then we'll do this dot controls equals new orbit controls, and we want to give it to our this dot camera and this dot canvas. So we passed up the canvas here earlier. Then let's just enable some dampening. So this dot controls dot enable damping equals true. And I'll mess with this later, but let's just put zoom here. Enable zoom. And I'll be setting this to false later, so let's just leave it like that. Okay, so let's make sure we don't have any errors. Let's go back. Uncaught type error, cannot read properties of undefined reading position. Okay, yeah, and that's because we forgot to we have to update the controls. Let's see, what seems to be the problem? Oh, it's not called camera, it's called this dot perspective camera. Okay, now you can move around with click and drag, and you can zoom out with your middle mouse button. And there, okay, so we can see our scene. That looks pretty cool. Okay, so I want to put some helpers so we can see our scene. So I want to put a grid and axes helper, so I'm just going to go to the docs and copy their code. So this is the grid helper, and for now, I'm just going to put it in the orthographic camera area. And I'll just change it to this dot scene dot add grid helper, and let's change this up to 100. Actually, 10 is fine. Let's leave it at 10. And let's do the same with the axes helper. So let's just copy and paste this. And let's just change the length of the axes to 10, and then let's change this to this dot scene. Now let's go back to our scene and take a look at our axes and stuff. And wow, that's really small. So our stuff is really big because it's larger than 10 units. Now size doesn't really matter when it comes to Three.js, but I don't like working with bigger numbers. So I'm just going to go to room.js, and I'll do this.actual room, and then this.actual.room, and then scale, and then set it to like 0.1, 0.1, and let's just do 0.11. Let's just see what that gives us. And yeah, so now our room is, it looks to be exactly 2 by 2. No, not really, but that's kind of planned. And you'll also notice that the z-axis is that way, the x-axis is that way, and the y-axis is that way. So we could just work around with the orientation currently, or we can do this dot actual room dot rotation dot on the y-axis equals math dot pi and math dot pi. And now you can see we have the x, the z, and the y oriented correctly. And so the light's somewhere here, that's why it got brighter all of a sudden. Now, what I actually want to do, instead of hard coding it in here, we can just do it in Blender and re-add the mesh. So let's do that instead. I'm back in Blender. Let's go into wireframe and select everything we want to rotate. And then I'm going to hit R to rotate, lock on the z-axis with Z, and then type in 180 on my keyboard, and then hit enter to confirm that, and you can see it. We rotated 180 degrees. Let's also move it, so like GX a little bit, just a little more centered, but this one doesn't matter as much. So let's take a look at Kamaboko's portfolio. And notice when I scroll, it goes to the right. So if you think about it, let's put my camera from this corner like he does here. It's oriented from this corner. Let's just do Control-Alt-0 to put my camera at that location. And this is what it would also look like. So let me just do, this is also what it would look like in 3GS. So let me select everything. Let me turn off selection for the camera and select all of this. So here I have a screenshot. If we want this to go to the right, let's take a look at how that would actually happen. Well, we would have to do this, right? But wouldn't it be easier if we could just do GX? But take a look at what that does. It goes down. We would have to move both on the Z and the X-axis in 3GS to make it move to the right. And that's kind of complicated instead of just moving on the X-axis. So what I think he did was he rotated this another 45 degrees such that this becomes the X-axis. And this is the Z-axis. Currently, let me change our color. Currently, from our camera angle, our Z-axis is going this way, and our X-axis is going this way. So if we want to move it to this area in the same place, we have to adjust both Z value and X value, when instead we could just adjust an X value just by rotating it. So I think that's what he did. It makes a lot of sense. So let's highlight everything. So make sure you get everything. And let's do RZ and then 45, but not that 45. Let's do negative 45. And now it'll be on that direction instead. And so let's just make sure it's a little more corner to corner. So it looks like our building wasn't actually a cube, which is why I can't align it. But as long as it's a little bit closer, it'll be a lot easier for us. Whoops, I accidentally selected local. So now let's put my camera here on the Z-axis and Control-Alt-0. Let's go back to my camera. So yeah, let's select my camera so I can move it a little bit. G. So we have the same exact result here, right? And now let me deselect camera again. If I want to move it to the right, all I have to do is go on the X-axis. And this makes our life a lot easier. And before we export, notice that our fish is no longer inside its cage, and that's because it has keyframes associated with it, and depending on where you playhead, it'll be there. So we have to fix that before we export it. So let's go back to the animation tab and fix our fish up. Okay, so let's select our fish so we can see the keyframes and re-add keyframes. So let's see, my fish is here. I'm gonna hit Alt R to reset its rotations. And then let's come back here and let's just rotate it here like so. And then we have to hit insert location rotation and this will turn yellow. Then let's come to 60 And let's update this. So what was the previous rotation? It was 137. So let's also make this 137. And let's just rotate a little bit more on the z-axis like we did previously. Then let's come to 120 and do the same thing here. So 180 is not enough. Should be like this. Yeah. RZ. And insert location rotation. Then let's do 180. And this should be, let's just use the camera there. This should be close here. And then insert location rotation. And then remember, when we come back, we want to Shift D duplicate. And let's just highlight these and delete them with the delete key. Or you can do X and delete keyframes. And then let's put it to 240. And you can see that that glitch again. And let's just, this is clipping, I think this is clipping through the side, so let's just move it a little bit. And let's reinsert location rotation. Yeah, so we have to do 137, and then let's do plus 360, and reinsert location rotation. And now you can see it's back. So it's back to what we had originally. And I must have not inserted my keyframe for this one. So let's go back to 60 and update this. And insert location rotation. And now let's just play our animation to make sure it's working. And it looks like it's clipping through the wall here. So let's just move it back a little bit. Or maybe that's just my camera that's looking through it. Yeah, yeah, okay. Okay, now we can go back to wireframe and just file export it. And if you have remember export settings, then you'll have all the same variables. Then you'll have all the same settings you had last time, and you don't have to touch any of these. So I'm gonna call it finale. And let me find finale, original finale, and I'm just gonna delete that. And I'll just export the new finale. Okay, so let's come back to our code and navigate to that finale object or whatever you named it, and I'm just gonna drag it in here and replace the old one. Then let's come back into my scene and take a look at how it looks. So let's finish setting up our room. So remember our actual room is this dot actual room. So this dot actual room, and let's grab its children. And for each of these children, for each of the child, we want to tell it to cast shadows. So what we can do is do child dot cast shadow. Cast shadow equals true. And we also want them to receive shadows as well. So child dot receive shadow. Receive shadow equals true, and save that. Now let's go back to our scene and take a look at what it looks like. And you can see we have some shadows. But some things aren't showing shadows, and the reason for that is because they're groups. So if let's go back to console.log. Actually, let's just put the console.log inside the for each loop here. And let's take a look. You can see some of them are groups and some of them are meshes. So let's fix that up a little bit. So we can also check if they are a group. So if child dot instant, so if the child is an instance of 3 dot group, then so for each child in that group, So we can grab the child's children for each child, and I'll just call it, let's call it group child. For each group child, and let me put some parentheses. So for each group child, we want to group child dot cast shadow. So let's copy and paste this and change this to group child. And we have an error somewhere, so let's just check. Right hand side of instance of is not an object, and this is because this should be capitalized. And now you can see everything is casting a shadow. So let's get rid of this console.log. And now you can see everything is casting a shadow. Pretty cool. Now the shadow is extremely dark, and if you take a look at his portfolio, it's a lot lighter. And we can fix that. Let's go back to environment.js, and let's come here and add another light, and this will be an ambient light. So this is just light in the entire scene. So new 3.ambient light, and let's also make it white, hashtag FFF, and let's set its intensity to 1, and then this dot scene, let's add let's make this dot ambient light, and let's add this to the scene. Okay, so already with that ambient light, you can see we get pretty much the similar shadows to Boko's. His are a little sharper, I think. And I think we can fix that a little bit by turning this up to 2K. So let's do 2048 and see what happens. Yeah, yeah, I think they're slightly better, but no one can tell when you're far away, and we're not gonna let them zoom in that much either. So, yeah, it's kind of already looking like this. But you can play around with these settings as well as the renderer settings. So remember tone mapping, you can, play around with this. So if I change this to 0.5, you can see what happens. But it depends on your scene. I'm not going to play too much with all the customizations because it'll probably take a long time, as long as we get something close to it. Okay, so let's add our video texture and change this to a different material so we can see through it. And remember, we named this screen and we named this aqua glass. So let's go back to our room. And in this, for each child, they shouldn't be a group since we separated them. So we can just do if the child's name equals aqua glass, the name we gave it to in Blender, then let's update the child's material. So let's set the child's material equal to a new 3.mesh physical material. And this is the material we need to use if we want to create a glassy effect. So you can come to the 3JS docs here, and here is an example of using the mesh physical material, and you can see when we play with this stuff, like transmission, opacity, index of refraction, roughness, and you can play around with this stuff. Okay, so let's set the material's roughness to 0. Then let's set the color. Let's just set the color to white for now. So I'm just going to do 0x FF. Then let's just guess an index of refraction. I'm just going to put it like 3 or something. We can always change it later. And let's put the transmission equal to 1. And then let's put child.material.opacity, and let's also put that to 1. And let's save that and go back to our browser and see what that gives us. So undefined reading color, and that's because I misspelled this. So usually when it says undefined, you probably misspelled something. Um, let's see. Okay, yeah, and you can see we can see through it now. That's pretty cool. Now if you wanted to make it realistic, you could add an environment map, and the glass would could reflect that map. Um, but it kind of looks weird now. So let's simulate some water, and all we have to do is just adjust the color. So I'm gonna go to CSS gradient .io. Now there's some other great color picker sites, but I'm just gonna um, just randomly pick one from here. So let's see. Maybe something like this. So let's just copy the hex code for this and put it in here and take a look at how it looks. So, maybe that's a little too bright, so let's give some black to it. Okay, so I found a color that I like. You can see it here. But yeah, choose any color that you want. Okay, so now let's check for our screen. So if child.name equals screen, I think we called that in Blender in screen. So we'll find out. And then let's just let's just directly set the material. So dot material equals new3. And we just need a basic material because we're not going to be putting anything fancy for this one. New3 basic material. And in basic material, I'm going to map and this dot resources dot items dot I forgot what I called it. Let's go back to, so I'm gonna hit Control P to quickly navigate and just type in assets, and I called it screen. Okay, and then Alt back arrow to go back to my previous file, and I'll just map that video texture straight here. So let's go back to our browser and see if that worked. And it says 3.basicMaterial is not a constructor. Yeah, of course it's not. This should be mesh basic material. Okay, cool. And now we have KDA Parp Stars playing on our computer screen. Now remember, if this is upside down, you want to go back and flip Y, or you can go into Blender and flip the UVs. Okay, so that's pretty cool. Now let's start playing this fish animation. Let's create another function, and I'll call this dot set animation. And let's copy and paste this. Let's just put it down here. Okay, so now let's create a mixer. New 3 dot animation mixer. And let's put it on this dot actual room. And let me actually console.log this so you can see console.log this dot room. And remember, this is the entire GLB file, and actual room is the scene within the GLB file. So if I console.log room, you can see our animation clip is an array, and we only have one animation, which is our fish, so it's actually here. Now you'd think, so it's not actually on the fish, but it belongs to the entire GLB file. So then we can use the mixer to clip action this animation and then just simply play it. So this dot swim, I'll just call it swim for the swim animation, equals this dot mixer dot clip action, and this dot room dot animations and 0. So remember, this is animations. This is room, and then we want to grab the animation and grab the first one. And then all we have to do is this dot swim and tell it to play. Now we also need to update it in our updating function. So we have to tell the mixer to update this dot mixer dot update. And here we can use the time, our delta time. So this delta time right here. So let's do this dot time dot delta and save that. And let's make sure I have time. So I don't have time, so I'm just going to import time. And let's just change this to time. So now let's go back to our scene, and it should be playing. And it's not playing, and the reason for that is because we never updated it here. Nothing's ever calling it here. So we can go to our world, and in this update function, so experience world, and in this update function, if this dot room exists, then let's update it. So this dot room dot update. Let's call the room's update method. So if it exists, then update it. And the reason we need this conditional, is because before things are loaded, this is already going to be called by our experience class, and then you'll just get a null error because it hasn't been created yet. So when it's been created, start updating it. Awesome. So let's make sure we're actually calling this update in experience, and we are not. So let's just do it right now. This dot world dot update. So this dot world dot update, and let's also do this dot world dot, oh sorry, I put it in the wrong one. This dot world dot resize. So now it should be playing, and yes, our fish is playing its animation, but it's going extremely fast, and we can fix that just by multiplying it by a speed factor. So I'm just going to pick something like 0.0009 or something. Let's take a look at how that looks. Yeah, and there we have our fish animation. So let me just close this so we can see it a little bit better. And yeah, so there we have our pretty cool fish animation. It's floating around, and we can see it. So that's pretty much all for the room setup. I just want to show you one more thing when you play around with your scene. You can come to here and add a shadow camera helper. So I'll just call it const helper, and let's get this dot sunlight and get the shadow camera and then add it to the scene and save that. And now you can see the shadow camera and which direction it's coming from. So you know our shadow is going this way and our shadow camera is pointing that way. And notice when you adjust the light, so let's move this to 3 in the X direction. Let's do that. You can see our shadow camera also updates as well regarding the position of the light. So I actually want to move it this way, so I'm gonna put it -1.5. And yeah, so now our shadows are going this way, and there's not as many shadows here. Do my environment and just comment out the helper for now. Let's start working on some controls. So I'm gonna go into my world folder and create a new file called controls.js, and this will handle all of our controls. So I'm just going to go to room and copy and paste this into controls, and I'm just going to get rid of these functions like so, and I'll leave this Control X to quickly remove things, and I don't need any of this. And I'm going to change set animation to set path. And let's export the default class controls. So the first thing we're going to do is create a path that the camera can follow. So let's do that. And to create a path the camera can follow, we can use the 3GS curves. So if I go to 3GS curves and go to 3GS docs, you can see we're going to be using the curve and a bunch of these methods. Specifically, we want the catmull rom curve 3. So let's just copy and paste this into our set.path. And then I'm going to rename this to this.curve. This.curve. And let's also update it wherever it says curve. So this.curve. Then of course we need to add it to the scene. So because we copied and pasted it from the previous class, we don't have to work with that. And then let's do this.scene dot add curve object. Okay, so let's see if we can see the curve. Let's refresh just to make sure. And I can't because of, I keep forgetting to instantiate this kind of stuff. So let's go to world.js and import it. And I'll call it controls. And I don't think the order really matters here, so I'm just going to add this.controls equals new controls right here. And if this.controls exists, we want to update the controls. So let's save that. And there, now you can see our curve. So it's kind of a pain that every time we refresh, we have to zoom out to take a look at our curve. So what I'm going to do is go into camera. And in the update function here, I'm just going to console.log my camera position, this.perspective camera.position. And open the browser window just to take a look. And it says 29, 14, and 12. So I'm going to set that as my defaults. So for the Z, it's going to be 12. For the X, it'll be 29. And for the Y, it'll be 14. And let's just be a little more organized and move X, Y, Z. So now every time I refresh my page, I don't have to zoom in and out, and it'll just stay there. So let me get rid of that. Let me just comment it down for now. Okay, so before we make our orthographic camera follow this path, it would be helpful if we could see where it actually is. So I'm going to do that in camera.js. I'm going to find my orthographic method and add a helper here. And we already created one for the environment, and we can just copy and paste this helper. And I'm just going to paste it. I'm just going to copy and paste it right here. And it looks like I never even added the orthographic camera to the scene. So I'm going to do that right now. I'm going to do this.scene dot add this.orthographic camera. Then I'm going to change this to this.helper so we can access it. I also want to change this.helper, and I also want to change the camera that we're getting the helper for to this.orthographic camera. Now for a helper to work properly, we need to do some things in update here. In the update function, so firstly, we need to this.helper matrix world needs update. We have to set that equal to true. Then we have to tell the helper to update. And then what we also want to do is have the helper and its position to copy the camera's position. So this dot camera, this dot orthographic camera dot position, and we also want to copy its rotation. So let's save that and go to the browser, and we can't see it. So let's check for any errors. 3.buffer geometry is not a number. The position attribute is likely to have not a number values. Okay, well, it sounds like for some reason this isn't a, let's just copy and let's just console.log and see if it's a number or not. Well, it is a vector 3 and it's got numbers in there. Okay, so we know the position is a number. Okay, so let's just console.log our orthographic camera and see if we can like find something or something. Let's see. So let's open this up and oh, right here, bottom, not a number. So we have NaNs here. Wait, so far is right. So what seems to be the problem here? This dot sizes, dot aspect, this dot sizes. Oh, let's check sizes. Oh yeah, there's no frustrum here. So actually let's just move the frustrum into sizes. So I'm gonna put this frustrum here. And maybe on resize, we want to adjust the frustrum or something. So now it should work. Make sure to save both files. Okay, and yeah, okay, nice. Okay, nice. So now we can see our orthographic camera. That's pretty cool. Now we're going negative 100 to 100, and that's kind of overkill for a scene. So I'm just gonna make this a little bit smaller. Let's make it negative 10 and 10. And yeah, that's good enough. Let's take a brief look at the documentation to see how we are going to do that. So we created a catmull rom curve, and if we go to the constructor here, it takes an array of points, and these are just vector 3 points, so x, y, and z. Now let me show you where these are actually coming from if you want to count them. So I'm going to go back to let's go to controls.js. Now let's go to camera.js, and let's find our helper and increase this to 20. Both of these to 20, so they remain on scale. And let's go back to our v.js app. And notice if we go to controls, the first point is at negative 10 in the x direction. So positive x is this way. You can see from the axes. 0, well, that's 0 in the y, and 10 in the z. So if we want to count, notice 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then we can also count in the positive z direction. So I forgot where it was. Yeah, right here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And you can see our starting point is at negative 10x and positive 10 in the z direction and 0 in the y direction. You can also see that for our middle point here, 0, 0, 0. And that's right there. And then for our last point, we also have 10. So if you want to count, you can count 10 and then 10. And here we have 5, 5. So somewhere in the center of the grid in this quadrant, and negative 5 down y. So it would be right here. And on this side, we have the same thing, except on the other side, and positive y. So we get a curve like this. So if we go back to the docs, notice that there are also some other properties that we can have, like closed, and this is a boolean. So it says default is false, but let's make that true. So let's come here and pass that boolean value of true in there. And let's see what that does. And now you can see our two ends are now closed, and that's very helpful. The rest of this stuff is just creating a geometry so we can see the line. We will later remove this line so we can't see it. But for now, it's very helpful so we can see the curve. And notice, catmull rom curve 3 is a child of the curve class. So let's click that and take a look at the method that we're going to be using that's going to be really helpful. And it's called getPointAt. It takes a float, which is a position on the curve, so a 3 vector, a 3JS vector 3, and it's on the curve, and it must be in the range 0 to 1. So basically, if we get the point at 0, what we will get is we'll get this point. We'll get this back. Okay, so let's try this out. I'm going to create a dummy vector. Vector equals, so equals new 3 vector, and it doesn't really matter, but I'm going to reset these to 0. And then let's do console.log this.dummy vector and make sure that works into our console. And indeed it does. So let me just zoom out. I think that's too close. Now let's use the get point at on our curve. So this dot curve equals this dot curve dot get point at and get point at, let's enter 0, and it says position on that curve will be copied into this optional target vector. So let's use our dummy vector as that, and then let's move this down here and let's console.log, and we should get this back. So let's go back to our screen, and you can see